All right, ladies and gentlemen, take a seat. Teddy. Ted, you need to take a seat. I'm just messing with you. All right. For those of you who don't know, Ted's a longtime friend of mine, and I'm a little hard of hearing, and so wait a minute. Never mind. All right. This meeting is called to order, and before we move to the roll call from Mrs. Rose, I'd like to ask everybody here to please turn your phones to vibrate or off so we don't have any unnecessary ringy-dingy-ding. Mrs. Rose, please call the roll.
Councilmember Steve Rice.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector. Here. Councilmember Joe Pazinski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Diane McNutt. Here. Mayor and Chair Mike Wasserman.
Here. Thank you very much. Joining us tonight for the Pledge of Allegiance is Brandy Ronick, a Los Gatos Fisher Middle School student who is also a nationally ranked dressage champion. Now, for all of you who may not know what dressage is, I'm happy to share my newly acquired knowledge with you. Dressage means training in French. And if you tuned in a couple of meetings ago, when the Fisher Middle School French students were being honored, you'll realize I now know 6 French words. Dating back more than 2,000 years, dressage is one of 3 Olympic equestrian sports in which the horse executes in a series of precise movements in response to barely perceptible signals from the rider's seat, legs, and hands. When talented horse and riders perform dressage, it appears like a work of art or ballet. And Brandy, at the young age of 14, has already excelled in this challenging equestrian sport. Now I'd like to ask Brandy to join me at the podium. When I read her commendation after the Pledge of Allegiance, you will hear about her gold medals, her training with Olympians, and her determination to continue to the next level. Unfortunately, Pretty Lady, Brandy's horse and partner in these achievements, is not able to join us tonight. We once had horses on the plaza above the council chambers when the chief of police was sworn in, but I don't think we've ever had one in the chambers itself. So, Pretty Lady, I'm sure that you're watching from your stall. Congratulations to you, too. Before Brandy leads us in the pledge, I'd also like to recognize her parents who are in the audience tonight. Brandy's mom, Tracy, is an accomplished dressage rider herself, and her dad, Jeremy, has also achieved national recognition for his efforts skating on frozen water while carrying a wooden stick. Now, if you'll all stand, Brandy's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. There we go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you'll have a seat. And Brandy, here's the commendation that we were just talking about. I'm going to read it to you. Whereas Brandy Ronick got her first pony when she was 3 years old, began competing at the age of 6 in the equestrian sport of dressage, and in 2008, at the age of 13, became the youngest double gold medalist in individual and team competitions in the history of the North American Junior and Young Rider Championships at the United States Equestrian Federation Dressage Festival of Champions. And whereas Brandy competed with her equine partner, Pretty Lady, an 11-year-old chestnut Dutch warmblood, at the intermediary 1 level, a very advanced level, in the sport of dressage. And whereas Brandy has been trained by her mother, Tracy Ronick, who qualified for the U.S. Equestrian Team Long List in 2001, and Debbie McDonald, a member of Team USA in the 2004 Olympics. And whereas, after graduating from Fisher Middle School in June, Brandy is going to be a working student and train under Stefan Peters, who competed with Team USA at the 1996 and 2008 Olympics. And whereas Brandy has set her sights on competing in the World Equestrian Games in Kentucky in 2010 and or the Pan American Games in Guadalajara in 2011 and is committed to being a world-class equestrian athlete. Now, therefore, the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation, accommodation to Brandy Roenick for her dedication and her exemplary achievements in the sport of dressage. Let's hear it for Brandy.
Just want to say thank you for this honor, and I wouldn't have been able to do this without my teammate and my best friend, Pretty Lady.
Wonderful. Hold on a second. Hold on. We also have, I've got a mug and the pin. Where's the pin? Pin's right in there already. All right. Brandy, we have a mug from the Town of Los Gatos for you and a pin, which all the council members wear. Hold on a second. You're not done yet. And we also have something for your partner, Pretty Lady. These are a gift from Bayamo. Where'd she go? Bayamo, sorry. It's her horse. From Bayamo, our assistant town manager, Pamela Jacobs' horse, who also rides in dressage. Thank you. Oh, and the card? Yep. And the card says, to Pretty Lady from Bayamo. Thank you. All right, now I'd like to ask our outgoing student commissioners to come forward. I saw Stanford Stickney here. Stanford, you should be here. Adam Hadar is still, we're not able to reach him, is that correct? Jackie? Okay, so I need Stanford Stickney, Michelle Aronofsky, Peter Hadar, Brandy Petch, Amy Zhang, and Kelsey Hall. Oops, and Kelsey I believe is not available. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you. Nice to see you again. Brand, good to see you. These are our outgoing student commissioners. In serving on the town's commissions, these students have stepped forward to contribute to the community in a very positive way. They've given their free time to add their voice to issues affecting youth and making Los Gatos a great place to live. My fellow council members and I salute your interest in the community and look forward to seeing some of you on our adult commissions in the future, or even on the dais as council members. I'll read one of the commendations and then present one to each of you. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, so when I say Stanford's name, okay, just think of your own, all right? Or I'll say insert name here. All right. Whereas Stanford Stickney served the town of Los Gatos as a student member of the town's Community Services Commissions from October 2008 to June 2009. And whereas during this period he unselfishly contributed his time, energies, and capabilities to the Community Services Commission. And whereas the Town Council feels that such outstanding public service deserves special recognition. Now, therefore, the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render, with special appreciation, a commendation to Stanford Stickney and to each of you for dedicated public service to the Town of Los Gatos and its residents. Thank you very much. Excuse me a second. Thank you. There you go. All right, show off your plaques. These are some of the finest examples of our very, very, very fine Youth Commission members. And I want to tell you, last week, the Vice Mayor and I did the interviews. We had 18 openings total on our various commissions for youth members. And Los Gatos, another one of our wealth of riches, if you will, we had 24 young people step forward to apply for 18 positions. And all 24 were incredible. It was a very tough decision. We used Mike Loya, who runs the Teen Center, and also our police chief, Scott Seaman, made up our committee of 4 and making this decision. And Diane, it was a tough one and a lot of talent. Awful.
Awfully good.
She's good, awfully good. So when these people sign up, they're signing up for a couple of years. They're signing up to give up their evenings. They're signing up to commit for projects and subcommittees, things like that. These are young people who care about our town, just like our town cares about young people. So I think it's very, very important here. I think one more round of applause is appropriate. Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to ask members of the Community Against Substance Abuse, better known as CASA, to join me at the podium. Please come forward. Teddy, let's put short people in the front and taller people in the back.
I'm going to stick with her.
Get close, get close. Get close in here. Think of the TV camera. How close? There you go. Wonderful. Wonderful. Who do you need? Right there? All right, you tall guys in the back. All right. We are pleased to commend this remarkably effective group on its 25th anniversary of working toward its mission of fostering healthy lifestyle choices that help young people resist alcohol and drugs. Their fingerprints are on many positive programs, which you'll hear about in the commendation. And before I read this commendation, I just want to say personally, my kids, now 20 and 21 years of age, about 10 years ago, they were first touched by CASA, and that left an impact on them from the elementary schools up through the high school. And it's a very, very, very important thing that CASA, Joan Rogers, one of the original founders right here to my right, started in our program and continues today, meeting once a month and doing a lot of wonderful things involved in so many aspects in our school for our children. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I've had the privilege the last 5 years to represent the town and sit on the board, along with the chief of police and people from teen and family counseling, the venue, our teen center, etc. It's a wonderful board, and you've got representatives at the elementary, junior high, and high school levels? Correct. So they are everywhere, these committed individuals. Whereas in 1984, and what I have here, just as by means of a little introduction, I've got Joan Cross here, who's the incoming president, and Joanne Rogers, who's the founding member. Whereas in 1984, CASA, a local nonprofit organization, was founded as Community Against Substance Abuse by 2 Los Gatos mothers in an effort to change teens' attitudes about using illegal substances through providing positive alternative activities. And whereas CASA plans, funds, and carries out events aimed at education and healthy lifestyles for children, including Red Ribbon Week, Drug Awareness Week, and the CASA Los Gatos High School Fashion Show. And whereas CASA provides funding for school events and activities such as every 15 minutes, the 5th quarter, concerts and events at the venue, middle school fun nights, Los Gatos High School grad night scholarships, and Los Gatos High School senior grad scholarships. And whereas CASA partners with Teen and Family Counseling Center, Parenting Continuum, Los Gatos Elementary and High School Home and School Clubs, St. Mary's School, CT English, Lakeside Elementary, Los Gatos Montessorino Police Department, the Shift Coalition, Project Cornerstone, Town of Los Gatos, City of Montessorino, and the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Department. Whereas CASA's recent accomplishments have been providing 3 scholarship awards to Los Gatos High School seniors, taking an active role in the 30% decrease in drug and alcohol suspensions at Los Gatos High School since last year, recognizing 8 students with monetary awards for an art contest during Drug Awareness Week, and having over 150 Los Gatos High School students participate in the CASA Spring Fashion Show. Now, therefore, the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation, commendation, and thanks to CASA for their outstanding contributions to the Los Gatos community. Let's hear it for this organization.
As Mike said, CASA was formed, Community Against Substance Abuse, in 1984. I believe CASA has remained a very strong organization for many reasons, most importantly for the people that you see up here tonight. The strong, consistent leadership, and for the right reasons. And for the reasons that we started, it was to support people in our community, both parents and teenagers and elementary kids and all of our community, that they could say safely that there's an organization there that will support us when we say no to drugs and alcohol. Our goal was always prevention, and our mission was in the beginning to change the attitudes towards drug and alcohol use through parent networking, peers helping peers, education, and positive alternative activities. Measuring prevention is not easy. And for the last 25 years, I have no doubt that we have had many successes in preventing drug and alcohol abuse in our community. And we're very proud of that. And it's because of all of these people here and the continuing strong leadership that this has continued this many years, including the administration, the police, the council, and our whole community. And that's when we all got together to form our mission statement. And it wasn't just a small group that did that. It was our whole community. So that's why we called it Community Against Substance Abuse. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike.
You bet. And before Joan says 2 words here, I just want everybody to realize this is another example. It's a point we've been trying to make over and over and over again, especially hard these last 6 months. Los Gatos values youth. Okay? And here's another fine example of people that have been doing it for 25 years. Not everybody makes a lot of noise. Not everybody is so obvious. Okay? But in each and every part of our community, there's individuals and organizations that value youth.
Thank you. As Mike had mentioned, we do have a couple of our Drug Awareness Week winners here tonight, and I would like them to be recognized as well. Can you guys come forward, please? We have a contest, an art contest every year, and this year we had video representation, we had paintings and posters, and we also had poems. So we have here Sean Huntley, Robert Laird, and David Chang, who were all winners, and they were supposed to provide us with artwork that represents healthy lifestyles or a lifestyle against drug and alcohol abuse, and they were nice enough to be able to take a little time out of their evening and come and be recognized this evening. So I'd like them to all be recognized by the people present. And also, if anyone is interested in getting more information about CASA, we are actively looking for volunteers. We do have a website, which is casalgca.org, casalgca.org. And there's information on the table out front in the lobby as you leave that will give you some information as well. You'll be able to see the artwork that was presented by our winners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And I've got, I think I have, yes, I do. Right here. Joan? Joan, if you can distribute these are all pins. Okay?
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Good seeing you. Good seeing you. Now we'll call Captain Elena Forrest forward. The captain will share with us the impressive award received by members of the Los Gatos Police Department for their excellence in criminal investigation. Captain Forrest.
I'd like to start out by showing a brief video of the award that we received. It's a slideshow, actually, and if we can see the video afterwards, that would be great. I don't know if we can technically do that, but we'll try it. This was a statewide award that we applied for and was given to by the Peace Officer Standards and Training, who run state police training, and this was one of their investigative service awards, and we were one of about 14 agencies in the state that won awards for the Mark Achille homicide. So we're going to see if this works.
South Bay City of Los Gatos is another community where residents are unaccustomed to homicide, but police there are also investigating a homicide tonight. Witnesses tell us a man was shot and killed outside his condominium on Overlook Road. It's the first homicide in Los Gatos in almost 5 years.
A man who once owned a popular bar in Los Gatos was shot and killed today. The shooting happened around 11:30 this morning at a condo complex in the 18,000 block of Overlook Road. The Los Gatos Weekly Times identifies the victim as Mark Achille, the former owner of Mountain Charlie's Bar.
Some people there reported hearing about 8 shots fired from the immediate area. So when police arrived, they found a man down, received multiple gunshots, and he was found to be dead at the scene.
Now, we still don't know what led up to that shooting. Witnesses say that they saw someone running from the scene with a black messenger bag.
Two of the 4 men under arrest in the murder of a Los Gatos man have connections to a bar that the victim once owned. Kit Doe is in Los Gatos tonight, where this case is personal for many on the police force. Kit?
Ken, part of the Los Gatos Police Force said today that they are investigating this case very aggressively. However, they refuse to talk about the motive or details of the case because they say that it is still under investigation. But according to some of the friends we spoke with today, the victim, Mark Achille, and one of the suspects were dating the same woman at different times.
The Los Gatos Montessorino Police Department and our law enforcement partners today announced the arrest of 4 individuals for murder and conspiracy to commit murder in the killing of Mark Achille, 53-year-old resident and businessman in Los Gatos. The department immediately began a vigorous investigation of the murder and worked through the day and weekend, drawing upon our own resources and those of local agencies. By last night, the task force had completed its work sufficiently, and we felt it important to let the community know what we had been doing and the progress we'd made in making these arrests.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring up a few people. Sergeant Matt Frisbee, Sergeant Mike D'Antonio, Corporal Clinton Tata, Officer Brian Paul, I saw you sneak in there, and dispatchers Christine Crossan and Carla Nightstep. Have I missed anybody? Come on, don't be shy. This is just a small part of a team of about 23 people who worked pretty much night and day for a couple weeks to bring these individuals in. But it takes really the leadership and support from the top. So from the town council, Greg Larson, Pamela, everybody who was involved on the town side, Steve Conway, who had the purse strings to give us some extra money to investigate this. But this is a career-defining case for these people standing up here with me. And we really had to make a decision to ask for help because we're a small agency, as you know, and with this type of investigation, we needed help. So we had the courage to say we need help. We asked our partners, who we created partnerships with way before this happened, to help us out, which they did. And we really couldn't have done it without them. But I want to acknowledge the people that are standing here. Brian was one of the key officers on the scene that day that helped us with some information. Carla and Christine are dispatchers. They're specially trained in tactical dispatching, so they helped keep all of us, including myself, because I was incident commander, just in check and making sure I knew who was here and what was what and who was doing what, and it was just chaos, but they helped us keep it controlled. Sergeant Mike D'Antonio came in from a task force to help us. Sergeant Matt Frisbee was the detective sergeant in charge at the time, and Clinton Tata was also on the task force who helped us out. And it really does take a group of individuals like this to create an investigation that comes to where it has today, which is 3 of the suspects are going to trial in September. I'm sorry, 2 of them, 3 of them have pled out already. So it was really a phenomenal investigation, but it really does take the entire department and the entire town to do something like this. And so I just want to acknowledge everybody for their help, and especially people up here, especially Mike, Matt, and Clint, who are really my dream team that I turn to help get this investigation going, and we got 5 suspects in jail because of it. So thank you guys.
Captain, I think it's you that need to be acknowledged. And what I was saying, Captain, is I appreciate your humbleness and of your entire department. You took care of a situation that's not common, thank God, in this town. That was extremely serious. And the award was the Post Award that your department and individuals involved won because of this case. But you know, we were talking to people, Greg Larson and I, the town manager, were talking to people the other day and asked what they thought about Los Gatos. And I was waiting for a beautiful downtown. I was waiting for these, you know, historic this and historic that. But one of the main comments that was made was, "I feel safe." And it was interesting because this came from adults and from children. And it's because of you and your entire department, and please extend that on to the chief too. He wasn't available for tonight. That you make Los Gatos feel safe, and we thank you for that. On behalf of the council, on behalf of the public, thank you very much. Okay, and for everybody here tonight, this is how the next 2 to 3 hours will be, even when we're discussing a development and budget. We have lots of fun and no, I'm kidding. If you all want to get up and leave now, go right ahead. We'll take a 60 seconds to let you clear the room. Thank you. Surprise. Lots and lots of good stuff happening. Young people accomplishing things, adults caring about kids, our police department keeping us safe. It's a great town. All right, now we'll turn to the closed session report. I'll turn to Mr. Ori Korb, our town attorney, for that report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public. The town council did meet in closed session tonight on 3 items. The first was a conference with real property negotiator concerning affordable housing acquisition at 20 Dittos Lane. The second and third items both concerned yours truly. The first was, or the second was the public employee performance evaluation. The third item was a conference with labor negotiator, the negotiator being Rumi Portillo, the human resources director. In all 3 cases, no final actions were taken, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Korb. I appreciate that. Now we turn to council and manager matters. We'll start with council matters. Now, Mr. Przynski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I'd ask the staff to give us an overview of the status of our parks and lawns. I know we're in a drought situation, and we have done some cutbacks in water usage, but I've noticed, and some of our citizens have noticed, that some of the parks have taken a hit of late. And I wonder if the manager could address the issue of how we are maintaining our parks, which are a very significant asset to this community.
Through the mayor, Mr. Councilman Brzezinski, members of the council, Greg Larson, town manager. The Parks and Public Works Director, Todd Capurso, and I took a tour today of several of our parks. And two parks of particular note, Bachman Park, which recently had an irrigation system put in about 3 years ago. We are reviewing the watering scheduling for that, as well as additional broadleaf protection that can be put in for the clover and other invasive species that are starting to invade the park. So we think that one can be managed aggressively over the next several weeks. Of more concern is Town Plaza, which was just renovated recently, as the council is aware. We met today with the sod provider on site and received some recommendations, and we're going to be applying gypsum over the next 2 days on his advice and recommendations. So you'll see a whitish tinge on the grass for about 2 or 3 days that will aid the water percolating to pull the roots down. What appears to have happened is that when the new sod was put in, with the heat wave that immediately there followed, the roots did not penetrate down into the topsoil that had been laid as well. And on advice of the sod specialist, the gypsum should help that to occur to strengthen the grass. We are also planning an annual overseeding that will occur at the end of each event season. We will look at some sporadic overseeding of Town Plaza this spring to strengthen the grass before the summer season kicks in full stream. So staff is aware of it. We're pulling in the contractors and service providers to help us remedy the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Seeing no others, any manager matters?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, 3 items I did want to brief the council on. First, the third general plan community workshop that was scheduled for this next Saturday has been postponed till August 8th to allow the general plan update advisory committee to review the materials to encourage strong public participation in the next phase of the general plan update. Second, there have been projects underway in town. The College Avenue resurfacing was just recently completed, and we've learned that the sanitation district is undertaking some work in Blossom Hill Park that started late last week. And last announcement is just last week, the town of Los Gatos Public Library became the third or one of 3 libraries in the country to initiate the service of what's called My iLibrary Audio. And it is the first audio download service for textbooks from major publishers such as Random House, Simon & Schuster, and Penguin Publishing that is compatible not only with WMA and MP3 devices, but also all iPod and iPhone devices. And we're pleased that our library is one of the first 3 in the country to offer that service to our residents.
And you did say in the country, not just country.
In the country.
What a great town. All right. Just a little reminder, if you would like to address the council on anything on the agenda or not on the agenda, we ask you fill out one of these little cards here, submit it over here to the clerk's department, and we will recognize you. Also, if you haven't done so already, I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you haven't done so already, down at the bottom, you want to check that little box that says, yes, I wish to subscribe to the town's What's New email service to receive periodic notices about community events, services, and issues. My email address is, and that's where you put in your email address. All right. What else did you drop off here, Stephanie? All right. Okay, now we're moving on to consent items. And I would look to my council first if they wish to pull any of tonight's consent items. Yes, Vice Mayor McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be pulling, but I did want to note that item number 4, I'll be recusing because of my past involvement with the organization.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Diane, number 4. Okay, and Citizen Ray, you're choosing to pull 5 and 7. And no other cards regarding that. Bear with me 1 minute if you would, please. We have a high-tech filing system here. All right. Okay, so council, I'll look for a motion for consent items excluding 5 and 7.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar exclusive of 5 and 7 and noting the vice mayor's abstention.
I'll second that.
We've got a motion made and second. Looking for discussion. Seeing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So those are passed except for 5 and 7, which we will hear under other matters towards the end. Okay. So we'll bring that one back for there. Looks like my desk at home. Okay, we're now going to do verbal communications. And we're going to start with Citizen Ray, you're up first. Mr. Leonardis, you're up second. And Kay Little, you're up third. You each have up to 3 minutes to speak about anything you wish not on tonight's agenda.
I wonder if I might come after Mr. Leonardis. I may want to criticize you.
No, we don't want you doing, no, come up and speak. Let's go. Last in, first out. That sounds like a computer slogan. No, it's a
The
fight.
bashful guy finally showed up down here. Wow.
Start the time.
Indeed. Again, here I am before you. One guy out of 30,500 is down here to represent the public interest. I've been here 10 years in this town. I still cannot believe there's not one single homeowner association in this town that comes down here and takes care of business. Not one. There's just one guy. Guess who it is? If I say Citizen Ray, it sounds a little self-appreciating. I don't want to do that. But that's right, though. It's Citizen Ray. First item tonight. I brought to your attention at the last meeting a critical public safety issue, okay? The crosswalk at Walgreen Judd on North Santa Cruz is an abomination from a public safety standpoint. You drive along there, heading to the post office. The tree is so big that anybody that's waiting to cross can't be seen. I personally have seen a woman with her baby buggy hidden behind that tree. And I'm cruising in there at 25 miles an hour. All of a sudden, she's ready to cross. I tell you, it's disgusting. It's been let go for so long. So long. What do these public employees do? What do they do? Now, this man here, Caperso, is new, so I can't lay it all on him, okay? But that tree's been growing for one hell of a lot of years. And the crosswalk's been there for one hell of a lot of years. So what's going to come first? Tree safety or citizen safety? Which one goes? Which one gets moved? I'll be back. If nothing happens, and nothing's happened this week, I'll be back again, and again, and again, and again, till something happens. Secondly, Fisher School. Hundreds of kids walk down from the school every day or to the school, okay? They cross George Street. George Street is a little cross street right there off Mitchell Avenue, okay? Just half a block down from Los Gatos Boulevard. There isn't one iota of paint on a crosswalk. Not one iota of yellow paint on a crosswalk. How many years has that been existing? And the public employees have looked the other way. How many years? 50?
Thank you, Citizen Ray.
I'll be back on that, too.
All right.
Something's not done.
No more. All right, next person. Mr. Leonardis. And to the young people in the audience, I apologize for that language.
Try and beat me.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Leonardis from 136 Teresita Way in Los Gatos. I'm here to remind everyone we're coming up on an anniversary. It's going to be the 20th anniversary of the Great Quake of '89. And I remember that day very vividly. I'm sitting out in my driveway, 432 Los Gatos Boulevard, and the ground was shaking so hard that I felt like I was being electrically shocked. Sorry about my cell phone there. So I got on my bike and I rode downtown, and I noticed the extensive damage to our town. The La Cañada building, the Rankin block, the Beckwith building. You know, a lot of our historic homes were off their foundations. And I think, you know, we were fortunate in a way because we didn't lose any lives. But then I thought recently about this petition being circulated in town and how it's going to limit our council members' abilities to act in times of tragedy, rebuilding our town if something major were to happen in a disaster like that. You know, limiting our council to $7 million of town funds being spent for repairs to our public facilities is not enough money when people spend $15 million building a home in this town. It's not a lot of money. Clearly this initiative is being circulated with the sole purpose, which is to go after one project in town. That's why it was written so narrowly. And I think we all know what that project is. You know, I think the voters would be wise because of its narrow scope and because it limits our rebuilding in times of a tragedy, not just talking about the event itself, an earthquake, a flood, a fire, but the aftermath, you know, a pipe exploding, causing a fire and blowing up the whole, for instance, police station or something, and burning it down, and our inability to act in times of crisis, that this, you know, should be very well thought over by the voters if indeed it gets to ballot. In addition, you know, it discriminates against types of projects. It says, okay, the council's equipped to rule on public housing regardless of the cost. You know, it could be a $100 million project, but if it comes to $7 million to add a public facility such as, you know, a community center or something that we may need down the road, it, you know, effectively strips your ability to do that until the next election. And that's, again, the problem we have with the, you know, time of crisis. In an emergency, we'll have to wait for the voters. The way it's written, it says we will have to wait for the voters if we want to spend more than $7 million of town funds until we can rebuild this facility. And I just envision a bunch of people potentially camping out in the school gym or our police department being run out of, you know, out of the high school somewhere. So to make a long story short, you know, I'm not a supporter of this initiative, and I hope other people will.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardis.
Decide that as well. Thank you.
Next, we have Kay Little, followed by Pamela Lawrence.
Mayor Wasserman and town council members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I have a real concern about the petition that's currently being circulated. Several weeks ago, I went to my door and I found this fellow there, and I had a feeling what it was that he was going to talk about. And he said, you know, how bad we needed to have term limits. And I said, well, I'm not a supporter at all of term limits. I think we have them. You just don't vote for a person, and then they're not in office anymore. And then he said, well, it's really important for the community to have input with these multi-million-dollar projects. And I said, before you go any further, I need to tell you, I use the library weekly. I'm a big supporter of the library. And he said, oh, this isn't about the library. The library's already been approved. We're going to have a library. This is about future multi-million-dollar projects. Well, I knew that was not true. And I get around quite a bit in town, and I'm pretty active, but I really worry about people who are I think they're being misled or lied to. And I have a real concern. So I ask all my friends and everybody to not sign this petition, because I think it is, I think it could do a lot of damage, and I think that they're not being truthful about the intent of the petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Lawrence.
Good evening, Council. I'm sure you remember me from your last meeting, speaking again of the petition. I stated my concern about what happened and the way the information was given to the public is inaccurate, and how I tried to tell the individual, the petitioner who is asking people and giving the information, that he was wrong. You will hear more stories just like you heard, that he is continuing to give false information. Now, after my talk here the other day, I had a friend come up to me and gave me the elections code from the California, section 18600, that states it's a misdemeanor for any individual intentionally misrepresenting or giving false statements concerning the contents of a petition. And it goes on, which this man is obviously doing. There's more than 3 to 4 reports that I am totally aware of that he is giving false information, and he denies it. He keeps saying that the library is, in fact, taken care of and it's grandfathered, and we know it's not. I am looking for a way to try to stop this. I was also given some information by a friend that I'm hoping that you guys will be able to tell me if this is actually a true case. This person happens to be an attorney, and the attorney said that our town attorney could, in fact, do an injunction against this because the information is false and is being misrepresented on a continual basis. So I'm hoping that you guys can have a good discussion and help stop this individual and individuals from giving false information to the people of the town. Otherwise, we're going to have a petition go through that no one knows what's really going on. They don't understand that this is going to stop not only the library, but as this gentleman that just spoke before me, many projects that we may need to turn around on a fast response. So I'm looking to you for some answers and possibly some support. We need to let the people of this town know that they cannot or they should not sign this petition because it is falsely represented. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Jonathan Knowles.
Well, it finally happened to me. I showed up at Farmers Market Sunday morning. A petition signature gatherer approached me. I knew who he was. I knew, in fact, that this would, in fact, affect the plans for this new library. But I wanted to see what would happen. So I said, oh, tell me about the petition. What will it do? And, of course, he pitched it as fiscal responsibility and local government spending your tax dollars. After a while, I said, look, I happen to know that, in fact, this will affect, potentially, in a very negative way, our new library project. And he immediately replied, no, it will not. The library has already been approved. It is grandfathered in. He used those exact words. It's not just me. Other people are hearing this around town. Something's going on. These folks are misrepresenting what they're doing. Certainly the petition doesn't say it will affect the library, but it doesn't say it won't affect it either, so it's kind of narrow. It's interesting that there is no other project at that price point on anybody's radar in our town. They happen to choose a figure that happens to hit that one big project on our radar right now, and it's a problem. I've talked to a few people since who have been shocked and said, you're kidding, I didn't know that. I hope people do understand that there is a form they can sign to get their name off this position, because I know for a fact there are people who believe they have been duped into signing something that had they been aware of the facts, they never would have signed in the first place. It's happening in our town. It's clear, sneaky, dirty politics. It's an absolute shame. We have such a great town that something like this has to happen. I'm embarrassed by it, quite frankly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles. And I have no other cards, so I'm going to close the verbal communications. Mr. Korb, I am going to ask you, I've heard several of these comments, stories myself of what's been taking place. What can be done? The individuals, the town, what possibilities are there?
Well, one of the speakers did refer to an election code provision that does make it a misdemeanor to falsely represent the contents of a petition that's being circulated for signatures for an initiative measure. Anybody who believes that they have been given false information can report that to the police department. The police department can investigate, or the police department can refer the matter over to the district attorney's office. They do have a political affairs division or department that does investigate these types of matters and may, if they feel the evidence is present, undertake a prosecution. That's the easiest thing that can be done. And of course, anybody who feels as though they signed the petition based on false information does have the option of asking to have their signature withdrawn from the petition. But in order to do that, they have to do so in writing. They have to submit to the clerk's office their request. They should sign that request in the same manner that they sign their voter registration card, and they have to do so before the petitions are actually filed ultimately with the clerk for review and consideration.
So they must submit that to our clerk's office, who then forwards it on to the registrar. And
correct.
Goes from there.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Alrighty, now we're on to public hearings. We're going to start with item number 10, and that has to do with our Landscape and Lighting Assessment District, and we're going to have our Director of Parks and Public Works, Mr. Todd Capurso, if you'll open things up for us.
Certainly, my pleasure. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is our annual process for our landscape and lighting districts 1 and 2, which is 6 specific areas of the town. In landscape lighting district 1, we have 5 specific areas that each receive a specific benefit from the corresponding assessment. The primary purpose of these areas and these districts is to provide ongoing maintenance to these landscaped areas that provide a benefit to each one of the specific areas. The purpose of the public hearing is for the council to receive any input, specifically any protests on the upcoming assessments, which are proposed to remain unchanged from last fiscal year. The notice of intent of these public hearings has been published twice already, and to this point, staff has not received any inquiries, protests, or other written communication.
That was a very nice staff report. Thank you very much. Council, any questions of Mr. Capurso? Seeing none and having no cards, I'll close the public portion and I'll look to council for discussion and a motion. Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to ask for discussion, but I will move to adopt the resolutions presented in agenda item 10 for the assessment districts.
Thank you. We have a motion made. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Councilmember Rice. Any discussion, Council, regarding the assessment, item number 10? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Capurso.
Thank you.
We're now on to item number 11. And Mr. Paulson, if you can do just like Mr. Capurso did. Oh, no, I'm kidding. All right. What do we have here? Mr. Paulson, if you'll please go with the staff introduction. This is agenda item number 11. And Mr. Paulson, the floor is yours.
This is 15400 Los Gatos Boulevard. The applicant is proposing to have a zone change request from the current CH zone to a CH with a planned development overlay, and to construct a 40,000 square foot 2-story commercial building with 1 level of underground parking. The site's located at the southeast corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Gateway Drive. The site was most recently occupied by Swanson Ford and Hertz Rental Car, and prior to that it was occupied by McHugh Lincoln Mercury. The site has frontage on Los Gatos Boulevard, Gateway Drive, and Carlton Avenue. Abutting properties to the north, south, and west are all developed with commercial properties, while the properties to the east are developed with multifamily residential projects. This project goes back to November of 2006, where the CDAC reviewed a proposal for a 55,000 square foot 2-story office building with 1 level of underground parking. The CDAC's comments and the applicant's response to those comments are included in the staff report. Subsequently, the applicant submitted an application for a 55,000 square foot mixed-use commercial building with 2 levels of underground parking. That application was reviewed by the Planning Commission on May 14th of 2008 as a study session to get input from neighbors as well as the Commission regarding the proposed project. Following the study session and the comments from the neighborhood and the Commission, the applicant revised their plans and modified the building to be 40,000 square feet with 1 level of underground parking. The applicant had provided 2 elevations at that March 25th, 2009 Commission meeting that they considered. One option had exceptions for height as well as rear setback, which was option A of the original March 25th meeting. Option B had no exceptions. However, the Commission considered it and took public testimony and ultimately continued the matter, directing the applicant to revise the proposal, redesign it to reduce the mass and scale. One option that was thrown out there was to take the single-story portion of the building and move it towards the Village Square side frontage. The applicant subsequently provided 2 additional elevations, which are the current option A and option B. Both option A and option B comply with all zoning requirements. However, option A has incorporated features to reduce the apparent mass and scale, which are outlined in the staff report. Option B is in fact the proposal that has the single-story element along the Village Square frontage, which is to the south. After receiving public testimony and Commission discussion, the Commission went through a series of motions, ultimately recommending denial of the proposed project. The motions that they went through prior to that were one of forwarding the project to the Council without a recommendation from the Commission, and subsequently a motion to approve, make a recommendation to approve to the Council site option A. Neither of those passed due to a lack of majority votes, and so the last motion that was made was to recommend denial. The recommendation was based on their determination that the project wasn't consistent with the general plan or Los Gatos Boulevard plan because it had significant impacts on views to the hillside due to the visible mass and scale of the proposed structure. The Commission also provided additional comments for the Council's consideration as they move this forward. Those were that they were concerned about viewing this project individually given the other projects that will be coming forward in the future. They also requested a joint study session between the Council and the Commission to discuss Los Gatos Boulevard projects in general. Another issue that came up was that the Council should consider whether a moratorium is appropriate until a clearer plan is laid out for the projects on the boulevard. The last 2 were that they were concerned about the cumulative impacts of projects on Los Gatos Boulevard and not looking at individual projects on an individual basis as they came forward. And lastly, that option A of the 2 options that were presented at the last Commission hearing was the preferred option over option B. Although the project is not asking for any exceptions, the plan development application is still moving forward. There are 3 reasons for that. One is the application initially started as a plan development because they were requesting exceptions. Second is the general plan encourages parcels over 40,000 square feet to be processed as planned developments. And lastly, the Council had provided direction to staff that sites that were going to be converting from auto uses to another use should be processed as a planned development. The PDs also only require conceptual plans. However, the applicants provided detailed plans to show the architectural excellence that they are proposing as part of this project. As a result of that, the plan development ordinance has a performance standard that allows the Development Review Committee to be the deciding body for an architectural and site application if, in fact, this PD is ultimately approved. Mass and scale and views of the hillside were concerns of the Commission. The Boulevard Plan and Commercial Design Guidelines are both applicable to this site. They provide direction for development and improvements along Los Gatos Boulevard. They provide the following 5 general directions. One is to locate buildings adjacent to the street and locate parking in the rear. Second is to stagger the buildings along Los Gatos Boulevard to avoid a tunnel effect. Third, to articulate facades to minimize building mass. Fourth, to frame rather than block scenic views. And lastly, views to the surrounding hillsides should be maintained, especially at signalized intersections. Staff provided a table outlining the commercial developments that are adjacent to the proposed project, illustrating FAR. While this project is the largest relative FAR in the immediate area, it should be noted that a couple things. One is the project has been reduced by 15,000 square feet when compared to the original proposal that was reviewed by both the CDAC and at the Commission during their study session. And second is that when those projects were developed, underground parking wasn't as feasible or necessary as it is currently. And so the resulting at-grade parking really restricts the development potential of those sites to their current state, which limits the FAR. The town's consulting architects reviewed both option A and option B. His comments are illustrated in the staff report. Staff concurs with his finding that option B is not a preferred alternative. It's very much the old guard of how auto-oriented development was developed. Another issue that the Commission spoke about, and during one of the Commission hearings they asked applicants as they came forward, regarded uses. The applicant's currently considering a mix of uses: professional office, general office, medical office, restaurant, and or retail. The applicant has stated numerous times that they'd rather not be limited to specific uses, and that the fact that all of the proposed uses are actually permitted uses based on the current town code, with the exception of the restaurants which would require an additional conditional use permit. Traffic was another issue that was raised in terms of cumulative impacts. TJKM prepared a traffic study, and the findings of that are outlined in the staff report. Additionally, Rich Haygood from TJKM is here to answer any specific traffic questions that may arise that staff's unable to answer. The issue of cumulative impacts was an issue that the Commission struggled with, given looking at these projects individually. In 2000, the general plan was updated and the EIR was completed for that, for the entire town, including Los Gatos Boulevard. These projects are all general planned mixed-use commercial, and as such they're being moved forward and developed in that nature. The traffic consultant reviewed the current project, and in addition to existing projects that are currently being proposed, to look for significant impacts. No significant impacts were found. The process is currently going to be further updated during the current general plan update process. So again, traffic will be looked at on a cumulative basis for the town in general and Los Gatos Boulevard specifically. So further traffic analysis will be performed over the next approximately year and a half as part of that update, and further information will hopefully be gathered at that point. Given that the traffic is in excess of 5 peak hour trips, community benefits required for the proposed project. The applicant's proposing to provide community benefit to offset the potential impacts. They're proposing 4 potential community benefits. One is to improve the landscaping in the median and Gateway Drive. The second is to create a new park strip by pulling the existing sidewalk back from Gateway Drive and creating a new park strip adjacent to Gateway Drive. Additionally, they're proposing, if option A should be ultimately approved, a new 6-foot sound wall along approximately 100 feet of the southern property line up to the trash enclosures to help mitigate sound impacts that have been raised by the neighbors. And lastly, they had proposed a new traffic calming crosswalk at the intersection of Gateway Drive and Carlton Avenue over to the park. The applicant, consulting architect, and even ultimately the commission find that option A is the most appropriate proposal. The support for option A is based on the negative aspects that were outlined by the consulting architect for option B. The mass and scale, when viewed from Carlton from the initial review by the commission in March to May, has been significantly reduced by stepping back the second story and creating additional first floor roof area. No exceptions to the town code requirements are necessary. And that option A provides a site layout that is superior to option B. However, staff believes, as I'm sure will happen as a matter of course, that the council should carefully consider the mass and scale, the views of the hillside, uses, pedestrian circulation, landscaping, community benefit, as well as the comments offered by the Planning Commission at the May hearing. Should be noted that the story poles that are currently at the site reflect option A from the March 25th meeting. The currently proposed option A is approximately 2.5 feet lower than the poles that are out at the site currently, and the applicant can provide further information regarding how that impacts the potential views of the site. There's also a desk item for this matter, which was an email with an attached photograph from Long Ridge Avenue showing the impacts to the views from that vantage point. And staff is available if council has any questions.
Mr. Paulson, thank you for a very comprehensive summary of what's been a long, ongoing, complex. And I applaud your memory. My memory is horrible, and I saw you look down at your notes every now and then, but otherwise we're recalling that for a long time. So nice job. I appreciate your articulation and all. You presented that very well. Council, any questions of Mr. Paulson? Vice Mayor McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have 3 specific questions at this point, and I'm sure more will come later as we go through the discussion. You mentioned that in the 2000 general plan that we're currently working under, that there was analysis of cumulative traffic, including on the boulevard. Did that assume that the auto dealerships stayed, or did that assume that the auto dealerships had converted to some type of mixed use?
I don't know that they specifically anticipated all of or many of the auto dealerships vacating and being redeveloped with additional uses. However, they have traffic models that they put information into that make best guess opportunities, and then again, subsequent on a case-by-case basis, the individual projects are reviewed for traffic impacts, and then those are checked against that information as well as pending projects to make sure that no significant impacts will arise as a result of the project.
Okay. And then may I just do my other 2 questions? Thank you. One of the questions and concerns that came up was how the site is going to be accessed, and the Scheme A, which has the building on the corner, only has access to the site off of Las Gatos Boulevard with no traffic access off of Gateway or Carlton. So everyone who is going south on Las Gatos Boulevard is going to have to make a U-turn there at the entrance to the shopping center to get back to it. Staff's recommendation, or the traffic consultant's recommendation, was to make that queue line longer. That's kind of already a long light in my experience. So my question is, how comfortable and confident are you that that small addition to the queue line is really going to be able to handle that traffic? I know there was some discussion of another median cut through, and I understand that that is not a good option because they're so close together, but can you speak to that and make me feel a little bit more at ease about that option?
I believe that Rich Haygood from TJCAM could offer probably more insightful information. However, staff is comfortable with, they suggested, I believe, a minimum of 200 foot of queue where there's 170 feet. Our town traffic engineer, Jesse Pooh, had determined that even more than that would be necessary, and so the condition reads as such. And if I remember off the top of my head, it's either 225 or 250. I can't remember. I can get that information.
Okay. We'll have the traffic consultant answer Vice Mayor McNutt's question in just a
Later.
second. Did you have a third one?
I do. And my third question is on the community benefit and the applicant's offer to build the crosswalk. From reading the transcript of the Planning Commission, there appeared to be mixed feelings on the part of the neighborhood as to whether or not that would be a good solution. There was also concern about the speed of traffic going south on Carlton from Gateway, and there were various suggestions as to ways to calm that down. Is it possible, if we were to go forward with this, for there to be a condition for a set amount of money put aside for traffic calming to be determined through our normal process, which involves the neighbors, and to let them determine what would be most effective for their particular situation? And I see the attorney is ready to answer. I'm afraid I know what that means the answer is.
Well, actually, I'm going to suggest that you put that question to the applicant. He's making the offer independent of any requirement of the town, so is the applicant willing to modify the offer and make it a condition?
I will do that. That
Thank
concludes my questions.
And now, Mr. Paulson, as far as a traffic expert, you mentioned to answer Vice Mayor McNutt's second question.
Yeah, he can come forward and do that.
Come on forward, sir. If you'll please identify yourself. Do you need the question repeated?
No, I think I've got it. Thank you.
All right.
Good evening, council members. I'm Rich Hague with TJKM Transportation Consultants. We are the on-call traffic engineering firm for the town of Los Gatos. And regarding the left turn storage for southbound Los Gatos Boulevard at the Village Square entrance, that's there would be additional left turns because that's the only way to get in from southbound Los Gatos Boulevard to get to this project site would be by making a U-turn there at that signal. So that does generate the recommendation for extended storage length. So obviously a longer queue is still expected. With that, we still expect the delays there would be within a level of service A in the morning and level of service B in the evening overall for that intersection. I expect there would be a slightly longer delay, by a few seconds for that specific left turn movement with this project.
And if you could please, level service A and level service B are what?
Oh, those are the best operating conditions on the scale of measurement. Level service A through F, with F being totally congested with very long queues, and C is usually very good operations. D is when things start to get a little sticky.
So A in the morning, B in the evening is what you're saying?
Yes.
So B is a little below ideal?
C is the design, C or D is actually the design standard.
Oh, okay.
B is still very good.
Wasn't aware of that. Thank you. Vice Mayor McNutt, any follow up? Okay, that'll be it. Thank you very much. Council, any other? Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mayor. Question for staff, and I will be asking the same question of the applicant. I met with Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Dare, posed the question at that time, but I'll start with staff. And it has to do with the traffic. As I understand the staff report, there is a net increase of 1,933 trips on Los Gatos Boulevard. It's actually an increase of 2,000 plus, but the net amount is 1,933, correct?
Correct.
And in determining what the increase would be, in addition to the project itself, the Swanson Ford on Blossom Hill was considered, correct?
Correct.
All right. But the Honda space was not, and the Chevy space was not, and the Caldwell was not. Are those all correct?
Caldwell was on there. That's the 371 Los Gatos Boulevard.
Okay, so Caldwell was?
Correct.
All right. So it's the Honda and the Chevy places were not.
Correct.
And there was also a discussion in the commission about more not being considered, but as I understand it, that isn't anywhere on the table at this point. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll have the applicant come up, give their presentation. When their time is expired, then I've got these cards here for speakers. This is regarding agenda item 11.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, just to note for public record, I did meet with the applicant and the architect prior and visited the site numerous times, as well as the neighborhood.
Thank you. I see Vice Mayor McNutt shaking her head, me as well, and Mr. Rice. So all of us have done the same. Thank you. Mr. Dare, start your presentation.
Good evening, Council. My name is Kevin Dare with Sandhill Property Company. Thank you so much for your time. So as Mr. Paulson had mentioned, we had been working with staff for well over a year for 15,400, and it's been a great experience working with staff. An integral part of our process was Council's reaffirmation of the Los Gatos Boulevard plan several months ago. This gave us clear direction to follow. It also gave us a roadmap of how our project would fit into Los Gatos Boulevard. As Mr. Paulson had mentioned, we had met with Planning Commission on March 25th, and the outcome of the meeting was to specifically study 2 items. The first was flipping the site plan to reduce the noise pollution and noise penetration into the neighborhood. Secondly, it was to look at additional benefits and alternative public benefits for our surrounding area, and we addressed both of those comments fully. We created an additional site plan based on Planning Commission's comments and community's comments, which is site plan, or option B now. Additionally, we looked at public benefits, which include the enhancement of the landscape median on Gateway, creating a double row of trees and a pedestrian landscape buffer on Gateway, pedestrian crosswalk on Carlton that is crowned at the top for traffic calming, and also include the suggestion by the Community and Planning Commission at adding traffic calming along Carlton Avenue, subject to the neighborhood, the town engineer, and also the traffic consultant's consent and support. But to our disappointment, Planning Commission denied our project. We believe we have addressed all of their questions and their comments. We are as of right for the CH zone. We're not asking for any variance. We are only classified as for a PD zone because all auto dealerships are required to come to council under a PD zone and thereby to be presented to council. We abide by the Los Gatos Boulevard guidelines in the letter and the spirit of the law. And we are providing additional public benefit, even though the problem we are fixing is an existing condition and it's not something created as a result of our project. We also believe that we are setting the project a high standard for Los Gatos Boulevard for future development, from an architectural and also from a material standpoint. So we're asking that you approve Plan A based on what I've discussed, but more than anything because we believe it will be an enhancement to the community. We have Ken Rodriguez from KRP who's going to walk us through the specifics of the plan.
And Mr. Rodriguez, I'm guessing you're going to want to turn and face the slideshow so you can pull out your mic.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Okay, I think I just want to quickly run through a few slides that we showed members of the public as well as the Planning Commission at our meeting earlier this last month. The Planning Commission had a series of a few questions, Mr. Dare said. We tried to answer all of those. They talked a little bit about should Los Gatos Boulevard and the Gateway be considered a node. The Los Gatos Boulevard plan does not consider that intersection as a node. There was also a lot of discussion about would a building that was flipped block views of the hillside from Los Gatos Boulevard and the intersection of Gateway and Los Gatos. The slides on the right here are Scheme B, which is the flip project. The slides on the left here are Scheme A, which is our original proposal. And looking at both of them, taken from the exact same spot and superimposing in 3 dimension the building design, you can see that this particular part of the hillside, a little bit of it is blocked here with the added second story element. In this view, because you're a little closer to the street edge, a little bit more is blocked in this than as the building is pushed back at the site. They also asked, would the building be better from a site planning standpoint if it was flipped? I'll go through that in a second. Kevin's already talked about the community benefits, and we can answer any questions you have about that. And then they also pointed out, how can you connect Los Gatos Village Square with this new project, which is an important element. And then they also asked us to make sure that we were using materials that existed in the neighborhood. And this is a site plan of both A, and I'll shortly show you scheme B, but here you can see the one-story building portion here, the two-story portion in the back. As Kevin mentioned, we're proposing to add an increased landscape buffer here, a neighborhood plaza at the corner. We've recessed the second floor to break up the rear elevation and create some added interest. We've extended a sound wall up and around, and also a large architectural feature to where the cars go down below to the garage. That noise would be masked by an architectural mass there. And I think, the other thing that you can see is the two projects, both Los Gatos Village Square and the proposed project, work well together in the sense they form a crescent, which really creates a very nice parking air court in the middle. The old DiMartini Orchard or Carl's Jr. here in the center. We're extending the existing landscape buffer, which is quite nice, and adding back in two large specimen trees that have died over time. Scheme B actually flips the project, and from a site planning standpoint, I believe it really cuts itself off from the adjacent retail center. All the parking would be located out on the corner, exposed to both Gateway and Los Gatos Boulevard. And then the same types of community benefits would occur, as well as the landscaping at the back. One of the things that this does is it wouldn't need the additional sound wall along here because the building itself would block any sound. Although this is a retail office building, and going back to the original scheme, we envision retail restaurant use out here with an outdoor patio. There would not be any sound that would be anywhere penetrate into Carlton and to the neighborhood here. As you can see from this point, there's also some outdoor seating area here. And then they also asked to consider using materials that exist in the neighborhood. These are photographs from up and down Carlton Avenue. You can see the clay tile roof, exterior plaster, stone bases. Likewise, the Trader Joe's project or Los Gatos Village Square next door with its 1- and 2-story components. The new project just down the street at Lark and Los Gatos Boulevard with a stone base and exterior plaster and canvas awnings. The last thing I'd like to talk about is the rear elevation along Carlton. We made some changes. The Planning Commission asked us to consider them. We did consider them and then made them, and that is to create deeper window offsets on the rear elevation all along the back. We pulled back any second-story element to create a really nice one-story mass that runs all along Carlton. And as you can see from this slide, we superimpose the existing trees, which you really cannot see the building through those trees, except for the two locations where existing trees had died out. We show these at 15, 16 feet high specimen trees. Obviously, these are 30, 40, 50 years old, and they're quite nice. You can see this existing mass over here and how dense it is. But at some point, these will grow up and fill in that void and really mask that rear elevation nicely. We also showed an elevation to where you could see the existing height of Los Gatos Village Square and how this project is under the 35-foot height limit. As Mr. Dare said, we're not asking for any exceptions in the code, but I think also shows a lot more shade and shadow and punctuation in the elevations, the outdoor seating area. I think the variety of architecture is going to be quite a bit nicer than anything else along Los Gatos Boulevard, and the Planning Commission, I think, was quite pleased with the end result. So with that, Kevin and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. I'll look to council for any questions before we turn to the public. Councilmember Spector, why don't you start us off?
Thank you. As I said before, I spoke with the applicant and had posed the question about the impact of traffic if we include other large parcels, and if those numbers were available. And so the question is, do you have those numbers?
So we were in touch with and working with, I think it's best addressed through the independent traffic engineer with regard to those specific numbers. It was my understanding that I guess creating and hypothesizing what those particular projects could become is not something that was standard process. So in terms of the specific numbers and what can be envisioned, we don't have those numbers. We just have what's existing in the traffic report that analyzes the several projects that were stated by Richard before.
Okay, so you have no additional information?
No additional information with regard to.
Vice Mayor McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was directed to ask the applicant this question that I asked staff, and that is, and I did hear you say that you'd be willing to participate in traffic calming solutions for Carlton south of Gateway, as well as the crosswalk that you proposed. Would that be a set amount of money or an open checkbook, or what would you like to offer?
That's a great question. I think your suggestion before, which is to have at least the process be driven not through us but through the community, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we would also want to work with the traffic engineer along with the traffic consultant to identify what those elements could be and identify what a budget could look like, and to be able to support that as part of our condition. That would be something that we'd be able to support.
Okay, so I guess as we go through the evening, if we move forward, we'll figure out a way to have this languaged so that everyone is clear as what's being promised. Yes? To staff?
Seems workable, staff?
Yes, I think that if council's inclination was to approve and to have a condition that would offer some flexibility regarding traffic improvements, we could, for example, have improvements costed out at, the minimum what was offered, which was the crosswalk, but allow that money to be used for other projects that may be more desirable after a traffic calming process is, developed in the community. Something like that, so we can have a set amount. And I do want to remind council that if council were inclined to introduce the ordinance tonight, then we wouldn't want to be changing it substantially between now and the next opportunity to approve the ordinance. Otherwise, we'd have to reintroduce it. So we'd like to get that language buckled down if council's inclination is to go forward with the application.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McNutt.
Thank you. And I had one other question for the applicant, and that is on the use of the property. And I know that your preference is that it be open-ended so that you can come up with a combination of office and retail depending on what's marketable for you at this particular point. I was wondering if there's any new information on that, whether you still just want it open-ended. I mean, you do keep referencing a restaurant, so is it right now the intention and the probability that that front part would be retail and most likely a restaurant, or where are we on that?
That's a great question. We believe retail would be a great use on the site. We believe it generates activity. It activates the street edge. And if you look up and down Los Gatos Boulevard, it's still actually the type of use that provides the highest rent. So why wouldn't we want to have retail here? I think what our concern is mandating that retail be here. The reason, I guess, in my opinion, the worst thing would be we have a brand new building, yet the retail portion could be vacant. Rather than creating activity and space and generating activity, you're creating the opposite. One example is the building down the street on Lark and Los Gatos Boulevard. It's a 9,000 square foot freestanding building that could be divisible, but it's still vacant. So that's our concern. We can't control or force what the market will allow. We believe ultimately the retail will come back at this location, but we just don't know if it's going to be 1 to 5 years out. But we don't want to have the opposite effect, which is to create and suck the energy out of Los Gatos Boulevard and out of our project itself. So that's why we would ask that you don't mandate or require retail to be here, because we don't believe that if it's vacant, it does anybody any good.
all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to follow up on something that Councilwoman McNutt talked about, and that's this issue of traffic calming in the neighborhood. And I want to be a little bit more specific than to say, well, we can take the money from the crosswalk and we'll move it to something else if something else comes up. And I really would like to have language in place, even if it's generalized language that we could apply tonight, because I don't want us to run back at this if indeed we get to the point of an approval. So there's your mandate, Mr. Attorney. The interest I have is this, that when I read the Planning Commission's minutes, I got a distinct impression that the concern of traffic is mostly on Carlton, behind the adjacent shopping center to the south, where it makes that S-curve through there. It's really tight, it's really narrow, the speeds pick up. And I read in more than one occasion the traffic engineer as well as neighbors said 2 speed bumps along that road might be the appropriate thing for us to do to reduce that speed from the designated 25 to the measured 31, I think, is what the speeds were recorded down there. And I would like to, let's grant the fact that the neighborhood might not come together and say speed humps or speed bumps are what we want there. But I would rather see us be real concrete and acknowledge what was requested by the neighborhood, at least when I read the Planning Commission meetings, that what we do there is set ourselves up so that would be the potential option to be approved by the neighborhood and the neighborhood's dialogue, but that other options be available should the neighborhood want to move forward with some alternative. Because I think that I think it resonated with me that I saw the problem and I saw the potential mitigation, and I don't want us to get involved in a very cumbersome and lengthy process that we could probably shortcut to be able to take care of that traffic problem, which is not being produced or would be produced by your project, but it's circumstances that already exist. So that would be something that I would like to recommend to the attorney and see what your response is to that.
Mr. Larson, are you wanting to say something?
Regarding the traffic calming variation, 2 options that we've been discussing at the staff level would be, 1, to change the language that's in the condition now to say, or an equivalent traffic, a traffic calming project of equivalent approximate cost to the raised crosswalk, or with the applicant's willingness, we could just change that to a set dollar amount, probably be on the order of $20,000, $25,000 for any potential traffic calming with speed humps and the like that might be desired by the neighborhood. Okay. It is possible and likely the raised crosswalk would be less if it was unsignaled, unlighted, might be more if it was signaled or lighted. So that seemed a rough equivalent.
Okay, and we're going to ask you to answer that after you've had a couple of minutes. Are you prepared to answer that question right now, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, I am, Mr.
Go ahead.
Mayor. What the Planning Commission asked for, it actually wasn't, it was a member of the public, which is the testimony. We thought that was a great suggestion of placing a couple of speed bumps along Carlton, along with our crosswalk design. I think what would be easier is possibly putting a dollar figure on this so that I'm not an engineer. I do profess to think I know something about it, though. I'm dangerous in my own mind. And I think the figure of $20,000 seems appropriate because the crosswalk was less than that. And then, from our standpoint, that way we can work with staff and the neighborhood to come up with the best solution. I don't have that solution for you tonight, but I know we could arrive at it very shortly.
Okay, so we have what equate then to an offer of $20,000 to be used towards some traffic calming. Let's not tighten that up right now. Let's just leave that open until we hear from the public, come back to you, and then we'll wrap it up at the end if we can. Mr. Brzezinski, did I cut you off? Did you have another question?
You didn't cut me off, Mr. Mayor, not at all. But I did have just a comment. I'm thinking both and, not either or. So the intent was not to have a crosswalk or speed bumps, but crosswalk and. And I think that both would be necessary and be appropriate to enhance the community benefit.
And I think that's what you were just saying.
Yes, that's what
Yeah,
the developer agreed to at the planning commission.
Okay. So whether it's, okay, so we're there, we've got that set. I want to keep this moving on. I've got 2 more questions for you, Council, if there's no other questions. Seeing none. 2 questions. It was said earlier by Mr. Paulson that the existing orange netting is 2.5 feet higher than the current option A. Is that true?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm just going to go boom, boom like this, Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Secondly, I assume you got a copy of the desk item with the view from Long Ridge Road when there was some snow up there and not?
I have seen that. It's a beautiful photograph.
Okay. And is that netting, the top uppermost netting, is that the one we talked about being 2.5 feet lower?
That's correct.
That would be 2.5 feet lower than what's shown in the photo?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And question number 3, on your slide up there with the wooded building that was flipped to block the views to the hillside, views A and B, thank you very much. Without saying what I prefer A and B, because I want to hear from the public and all the rest at this moment, I like in B where I can see a little bit more of the mountain, and I see in A with a little bit more of the mountain is blocked. As bottom left blocks a little more of the mountain than bottom right does.
Right here?
As you pointed out, because bottom left is up, yes, right there, because bottom left is closer to the street.
That's correct.
So it cuts off the angle.
That's correct.
Okay? Which I understand if you're a goalkeeper, cutting off the angle is an important thing.
I was.
So, looking at bottom A, and knowing that the view of the mountains is important, I'll say to at least me, and I'm sure several other people, is there an option there, Mr. Rodriguez, architect extraordinaire, to do something with that right side, in the bottom left, the A, yes. Is there something there that can be done architecturally, leaving the A option, which forms that crescent, which you said has architectural excellence, and our consulting architect agreed with you, and staff agreed with you, and everybody else agreed with you. Is there something that can be done right there to get option A but not lose so much mountain?
There is. Let me go ahead to another slide. We had lots of discussion when we did this building not long ago. And you can see here we have a flat cornice treatment here.
Yep.
And now I want to go back to our proposal, which shows a large hip roof here. What we could do is come back and redesign that without the hip roof, which would cut the height of the building down quite a bit, and again give you more of the mountain, if that was important to the council.
Thank you very much. That'll do it for me. Council, anything else? None. Okay.
Thank you.
Public. I now have the public cards here, and given this quantity of cards, everybody's going to get up to 3 minutes to speak. Okay? What I don't want is we go through these and then 6 more cards come in and do that, because we need to manage the meeting. So I've got 1 more card coming here. If there's anybody else with a card, please bring it in, and you'll each get 3 minutes. Okay? Otherwise, I'm going to drop down to 2 minutes if we have a number of more cards coming in. Okay. We've got it. I'm going to call 3 names at a time. If I call your name, please come up to the front row behind the podium. Okay, so then we can cut down the commute time back and forth from your seat to the podium. We're going to start out with Horst Fent, if I said that correctly. Thank you. Mr. Fent, if you'll be up there, you're batting leadoff. Number 1, Citizen Ray. You're second. John Despars, you're third. Followed by Amy. Mr. Fent, please say your last name.
Horst Fent, 168 Carlton Avenue, also known as in back of Trader Joe's. I have 2 questions. My first question is, on May 18th at 6:17 p.m., I sent an email in regards to the lack of response or commitment by the commissioners to Mr. Paulson to please pass it on to the commissioners and also to the council. Have you received this email? Second question. Has every resident on Carlton Avenue received one of these notices about the meeting tonight or any other meetings? I'm in favor of option B because it blocks off the noise factor on Carlton Avenue to the residences there. Presently, we have Village Square, where there's a set of stairs going up to Village Square, Trader Joe's in particular. A lot of people use Carlton Avenue as the overflow parking facility of Village Square. And if there is a connection between Village Square and the new project, that's exactly what people will do. They'll park on Carlton Avenue and use the set of stairs, go to Village Square, and then over to the subject project. On November 11th, 2008, we sent a letter to the traffic commissioner. On February the 12th, they responded, "We don't have the money, paint your curb red by your driveway," because of all the U-turns which are occurring there. If indeed we're concerned about the public, just one second. The public good, then we should make sure the people who live on Carlton Avenue should be taken in consideration, not people driving up and down on Los Gatos Boulevard. Using subject B, you will see the hillside much better, and if you're concerned about the cars being parked on Los Gatos Boulevard, look at the facility on Blossom Hill where you see shrubs, trees that will cover all the
Thank you.
park.
Thank you, sir. And you can have a seat, and before we have Citizen Ray speak, Mr. Fenn, I've got your copy of your letter. It is in our packet, May 18th, right here. The reason it took me a minute to find is we had this to go through.
Okay.
And we had this to go through, but there's your letter. It's attachment 10 in our packet, and we did all receive that. I'll give that other question answer, but we don't answer them back and forth right here.
Okay.
So if you'll have a seat, that'll be great.
Thank you.
Yep. And Citizen Ray, just 1 second. Mr. Larson, can you please respond to the question about the radius of distribution of notifying people to the subject property?
The notices that were sent out were the same as the Planning Commission, which is 300 feet, and that's to property owners and residents.
Thank you very much. Citizen Ray, you're on.
Yes, I'm going to rearrange my comments. I'm going to put traffic first, okay? I have talked to residents who live on Carlton, okay? They tell me the traffic situation is so unbearable now. First 3 hours in the morning and the same in the reverse commute, because Carlton from National to Gateway is used as a bypass for Los Gatos Boulevard. And all you have to do is go there and watch it. The residents tell me they can't even get out of their driveways. There's such a flow of traffic, and you're going to add 2,000 more potentially for that same bypass on Carlton? I mean, on its face, it's idiotic. You want to do that to yourself? You will be the evildoers of the century if you don't understand what's going on and cut down the size of this project. It's too big. 4 pounds of you-know-what tried to shove into a 2-pound box. If you're going to represent Los Gatos, the people of Los Gatos, there's only one way to vote. Tell these people to go back to the drawing board and come back with something that'll fit the community rather than destroy the community. You go ahead with this as proposed. It'll be the last thing you'll ever do in Los Gatos with the favor of the community. It's my viewpoint, okay? And you need to know also, there's something brand new. The California legislature has passed a new law that says because of the recession, that any land use entitlement you give now will be doubled time-wise, okay? Right now, if you pass this thing now, they have 2 years to build, okay? Under the new law, it'll be 4 years. And this guy, this same applicant, has made all the headlines in the Mercury News with his debacle in Sunnyvale, okay? He's got no money for construction. And the project, unless he gets some money from somewhere, is dead. And it'll be 4 years before they get anything done otherwise, because he still has, he got the approval and he bought the land. But now he's got no money. Is that what's going to happen here in Los Gatos? He buys the land, goes through with his option or whatever he has, and then he's got no money. And it sits for 4 years. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you got to really be careful because of what's going on.
Thank you,
today.
Citizen Ray. Next is Mr. Despars, followed by Mrs. Despars. And Pamela Warren, if you can come up to the front row, please.
Yes, good evening, Council. First of all, I would like to applaud your efforts, and basically from what we sat through this evening at the beginning in regards to the youth of the community and in regards to all the good things that are happening, there are good things happening. Obviously, we have opportunities, and the big thing to look at here is, where are those opportunities? Joel, you did a fabulous job. I don't know how you can remember all this stuff either, but obviously you've taken a great deal of time. Joel was actually our planning commissioner for when our family remodeled our home about 5 years ago. And this is what kind of prompted us in regards to trying to figure out how come we went through so many different planning meetings and we had refusals in a residential when we felt that the commercial side wasn't as stringent. Well, come to find out, they are stringent because they have actually voted in regards to not passing this twice. So I think with that in mind, we definitely need to step back and say, what is actually happening here? And the big piece is the general plan. We have a general plan. However, it seems like time after time, buildings get pushed through, and it's not really following this general plan. And there are examples of that along Los Gatos Boulevard. The big piece here is Sandhill. Sandhill is obviously going to be a long-term partner of Los Gatos. The big piece here is the fact that this is going to be setting a precedent for future development along Los Gatos Boulevard and anything else that is going to be developed. And that is where we need to make sure that we are making the right decisions for the long-term plans of the community. And the big piece here is our beautiful hillside. They showed pictures which are great. However, they're showing pictures of Los Gatos Boulevard. They're not showing pictures of the neighborhood. And you did say that there was a nice picture taken from the neighborhood, and I believe Sandhill said, yes, it's a beautiful picture. That's the picture that should be up here, if it's so beautiful, because we should be really dealing with what exactly is affecting the hillside as well. And what's affecting the hillside is that beautiful snow that we saw at one time will probably not be seen if, in fact, we don't get it lowered a little bit. So it is a big building, and we need to make sure we're doing the right things with these big buildings. The other piece is that I think transparency here is going to take us a long ways. And what I mean is that I did reference the fact that Sandhill has obviously purchased other pieces of property, and if we get it right now, we don't have to do all the additional work down the road. But really doing our homework now is certainly going to pay off in the long run. So I appreciate it, and I know you guys have a big decision coming up. And once again, Joel, thanks for all the work that you did on this.
There we go. Put it back on. Mrs. Despars, followed by Pamela Warren, and then Scott Moffett.
Hello. One question I do have, did you get the pictures that I sent in from the boulevard?
The ones that were included in the Planning Commission packet last time?
That I had sent to the Planning Commission, were those
Correct.
forwarded to the council?
Yes.
Did you see those as well? So sitting at the stoplight and how much it takes over the stoplight? Okay. So that's one concern I have, is you sit at that stoplight, you still don't see those hills there. I appreciate your efforts with traffic calming. I worked probably 5 years on traffic calming in my neighborhood. I got a speed hump in and stopped, not me by myself, but the neighbors, we worked together. But it took a long, long time to get the right traffic calming, what everyone agreed on in our neighborhood. And actually, we all agreed on something, and then someone new moved in, and everything was changed. Unfortunately, the speed humps don't work in our neighborhood. The stop sign that you're talking about putting I'm sorry, we also have the stop signs put in at Gateway right there and Carlton. Roll through stop signs. There are 2 crosswalks there that weren't there before. They don't stop people. I mean, I have kids ride bikes. I watch people all the time right at that intersection. So I think traffic calming sounds great, but I think it's going to take a lot more of that. A big concern, you're traveling south down Los Gatos Boulevard and you're going to want to go into this new structure. Are you going to want to go down to Trader Joe's, make a U-turn and go into their parking? Or are you going to want to take a left on Gateway and park right there on the street or park on Carlton and walk in, which is going to bring more traffic to our neighborhood? We are a drive-through neighborhood. Long Ridge Road was not evaluated during the traffic calming process for this, so I would hope that you would take a look at that. One thing I have a concern with is underground parking. We live by a park where there's a lot of mischief going on nightly, and underground parking is mischief. I'm sorry. I see it when I'm down at town at night going out to dinner, kids skateboarding around inside. We have a safety issue there. I do have to say I like Plan B. I like that it's set back, but I really think we need to consider one-story buildings. I know that the chairperson of the Planning Commission insists we can't have one story on the boulevard because it will look like a strip mall. But if you look at like not Project Cornerstone, sorry. If you look at Cornerstone, where Whole Foods is, and they've done a beautiful job landscaping, you don't notice the parking lots. So if we do put parking lots in the front, there's so many beautiful landscaping things we can do to make it not look like a strip mall, just like in front of actually Village Square where Trader Joe's is. Let's see, I think my big concern is we do need to stop letting developers come in, build big, huge things, and then act like they're working with us and bringing them down to what might be code or all these little things you guys talk about. But they come in, they build big, and then they act like they're working with us, when in reality they should start with.
Thank you, Ms. Tespars. Thank you. And you should start with, just finish your sentence.
They should start with what the code is instead of above code and work their way down.
Gotcha. Thank you. Pamela Warren, and if Scott Moffitt will come up to the front, along with Jeff Scott, and then Kelsey Stillinger.
Thank you. My name is Pamela Warren. I live at 105 Filmer. I've lived in Los Gatos 14 years. Before that, I lived in Campbell. When I lived in Campbell for 11 years, I was the architectural advisor for the city of Campbell. I've been a licensed architect since 1983 in the state of California. This is a picture that was taken a couple months ago of a piece of the project. If you go by now, you'll notice that, of course, the storyboards are up, the windows are boarded up, and it has been spray painted, and it is covered in graffiti. And it looks like blight from a part of the world where we're not usually used to living. And I think one of the things that's going to happen with the car dealers as they close down, we're going to see things boarded up, and who's coming around at night and spray painting and tagging these buildings, and it really is giving a pretty bad impression. This part of Los Gatos, to me, when you come off of 17 onto Lark, this is a lot of first impressions of people coming off to see our town of Los Gatos. And what is the first thing they see? They see the classic car wash, then they see an office building. If they drive straight, they see a giant parking lot. If you turn right, you come to Ace Hardware, a gas station. You see a big water storage tank with a chain link fence covered in ivy, and then you see our proposed project site, which is this right now. I am in favor of Scheme A. I think it is giving kind of a grand entry to this portion of Los Gatos Boulevard. I like that as you walk into the site, you don't have to cross all the parking. If you in Scheme B, as you walk to each building, you have to cross the parking lot, so people riding on bicycles, off of buses, and just plain walkers are fighting across cars. I would think the underground parking could be gated or controlled, so maybe late at night when businesses close down, that could be closed off. I think that we would like to present a picture of Los Gatos that isn't just all about cars and all about parking lots. So I would like to see support of the scheme for Phase A. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moffett.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is my first time addressing the council, and it is a great honor to do so. It's nice to see that you appear to be taking the voices of the community so seriously. As a resident of the community abutting the site that we're talking about tonight, along with Mr. and Mrs. Desbars, who unfortunately had to depart, I want to make my voice known that a lot of things about this proposed development are contrary to everything that this community holds dear. Not the least of which is engendering the type of community that is residential rather than business-oriented. As was rightly pointed out before, this is a fairly large complex, and what concerns me is the pattern that I see developing, starting with the property that's now sitting adjacent to the Office Depot site and continuing on with this one. And it seems to me that the developers have less of a concern about the community that's going to be surrounding this complex than they do about creating their own curb appeal that's going to drive customers to their site and increase the value of their investment. One of the key notes of that is the pictures that were shown by the applicant coming from the opposite side, the southbound side of Los Gatos Boulevard. I don't know who lives over there, but that's not the mountain view that I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the view from the other side of that site. Among the other things that are concerning me right now are the underground parking, which Amy also rightly pointed out, are anathema to engendering criminal activity very close to a site where we most recently lost a play structure due to arson, and I want to remind the community of that. So there are a lot of impacts here that I think aren't being addressed, and obviously 3 minutes isn't enough time to talk about them all, but I want to leave you with one final thought, and then I'll yield the rest of my time. How much is a neighborhood that's already had to implement traffic calming with limited degree of success, as Ms. Despars pointed out, have to endure in order to satisfy the needs of a development community that really doesn't care about the community in which they develop? And I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Mr. Jeff Scott, followed by Kelsey Stillinger.
Jeff Scott, I live on Carlton Court. Here to talk about traffic, as a lot of people have tonight, and to ask and plead that if you guys approve this project, then regarding traffic calming, you please err on the side of going big and not going small with regard to traffic. I think at the Planning Commission, we actually talked about 3 or 4 speed bumps, not 2. I think it's a couple thousand feet stretched down Carlton Avenue, and 2 speed bumps probably wouldn't be enough, as Amy pointed out. We've had other traffic calming measures that have had little or no success. So again, I want you guys to think big and not think small, and please make it a requirement and not some vague, nebulous request of the developer to do so. Thank you, Mr. Brzezinski, for mentioning that earlier. I also wanted to clarify a couple things about the traffic report. Traffic report says that the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. While that is true along most of Carlton Avenue, there is actually a big chunk on the southern portion of Carlton Avenue that's only 20 miles an hour. So if the average speed is 31, we're talking about the average motor vehicle is actually exceeding the speed limit by over 50%. And in a heavily residential neighborhood with a lot of kids, when you exceed the speed, when the average car is exceeding the speed limit by 50%, that's a big deal, and that's an accident waiting to happen. Another thing I wanted to point out was, I think in the traffic study, they talked about a potential traffic impact of 2%, a 2% increase in traffic due to this project, and that I don't know where that came from. It defies belief to think that that's possible. If we look at the Trader Joe's shopping center, which is right next door, similarly sized or roughly similarly sized commercial development that has vehicular access only from Los Gatos Boulevard, it has had a massive and dramatic impact on the neighborhood right behind it. So to think that the subject property right next door, similar size, similar usage, is going to somehow magically only have a 2% net impact on traffic is just completely nonsensical. So I think that we have to, we appreciate the fact that the traffic study was done, but we also have to take it with a grain of salt. And lastly, I want to say the underlying premise behind the traffic analysis, I also have an issue with. The underlying premise as to why there would be such a minimal impact on traffic would be because we have all these major thoroughfares around, and so who would take these surface streets when there's all these major thoroughfares around? Well, anyone who's ever watched our neighborhood or taken the time to spend time in our neighborhood knows the entire reason people go through our neighborhood is specifically to avoid the major thoroughfares. They want to minimize the amount of time they have to sit through traffic on Los Gatos Boulevard. They don't want to be bothered going up to Samaritan Drive or down to Los Gatos Almaden. That's exactly why they cut through onto our neighborhood. So I think that is a premise flaws the entire traffic analysis, and it's probably the root of why they came up with only a 2% net increase as their estimate.
Thank you. Mr. Scott, if you can remain there for a minute, I've got a question for you. You mentioned the arrival of Trader Joe's and the impact it had on Carlton. I'm assuming the impact you're talking about was a negative impact.
Correct.
Okay, as far as bringing...
Well,
and what
negative impact on traffic.
To traffic. I'm sure you enjoy having Trader Joe's there.
Love walking there.
All right. The negative impact, you talked about two different things. You talked about people using Carlton as a pass-through and to avoid Los Gatos Boulevard. When I lived on Tate, people would do that to avoid Santa Cruz, and they go on Santa Cruz to avoid the freeway, and people always look for something they like to keep moving. Okay? You talked about traffic calming on Carlton, that more is necessary beyond what has already been done. We've already started a discussion as a community benefit of doing that. But what I'm interested in is your perspective on the fact that Trader Joe's was added. Are you saying traffic increased on Carlton because of Trader Joe's being added, and people parked on Carlton and walked instead of using the parking lot in front of it? How did Trader Joe's arrival impact the traffic on Carlton?
I cannot. I did not live there before Trader Joe's was built. What I can tell you is just walking down that street, Carlton Avenue has become a parking lot. I think someone else may have mentioned that. Carlton Avenue is the de facto parking lot for people who don't want to be bothered going out to Los Gatos Boulevard. That's why there's just a constant bumper-to-bumper parking along both sides of Carlton Avenue up there behind Trader Joe's, is because no one wants to go around.
I'm sorry, it's become a parking lot for people to go where? Employees of Trader Joe? For who? Who's parking their cars there? Are those residents?
No, it's not. There may be some residents, but people park the car, get out of the car, go into the strip mall, come back, get in their car, and drive away.
Okay, rather than going in.
In fact, we see fire trucks. I mean, obviously, we all love the fire department. I see fire trucks almost every single day parked on Carlton Avenue with the firefighters when they have their breaks, their time off, get out of the truck, go in. They give our kids stickers when they walk by the truck, and it's fine. I mean, the kids love seeing fire trucks there, but that's a perfect example of someone who doesn't live there who's parking and walking in.
Okay, the fire truck I understand, because they need to maintain as straight a line of shot as possible, so if they get called to have an emergency and getting out, as compared to being in a parking lot and trying to maneuver. I'm saying, well, but what I'm trying to learn from you, because you brought up a point that was interesting, when you said, you know, Trader Joe's theirs and now Carlton's being used as a parking lot, I'm trying to figure out, I know when I go to Trader Joe's, I go into the parking lot, and I wouldn't think about going behind and parking in Carlton. You live there, so I was asking you, who's parking their cars there?
So I think I know where you're coming from. So if I understand, I believe you live downtown, so you'd be coming north on Los Gatos Boulevard, so it's very easy for you to come down Los Gatos Boulevard and turn in. But anybody who lives over in the direction of National or lives behind there, or even in San Jose, coming up, they should be taking Samaritan Los Gatos Almaden, will cut through on Carlton Avenue or cut through on Long Ridge to get there. And also anyone coming from San Jose or from Lark Avenue, instead of, as someone mentioned, or a few people have mentioned, instead of wanting to go down and make U-turns to get into the subject property or to get into Trader Joe's, they can just turn into Gateway, park there, and park on Carlton Avenue and just walk in.
Because there's pedestrian access, is what you're saying. If there was a big old 8-foot wall, they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, but
okay.
Yeah, that's correct. But that's another thing that hopefully you guys can tighten up tonight. It wasn't clear during the Planning Commission meeting whether, especially with, whether there might be some sort of a doorway or gateway between the subject property and the Trader Joe's shopping center. And if there is some sort of access between them, then the pedestrian access to the Trader Joe's shopping center is essentially pedestrian access to the subject property as well.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Kelsey Stillinger is our final card for this evening.
I'm Kelsey Stillinger, a resident on Long Ridge Road. And I just want to second a lot of what's already been said. I'm concerned, first of all, about the precedent this building is setting, not just for this project itself, but all of Los Gatos Boulevard and the many car dealerships that are vacating. So I hope that we can find a solution that we're happy with and will not be this
contentious in the next few buildings. Also, to go along with that, I'm hoping, and I don't know for sure about this building, if it is LEED certified or making any efforts to be environmentally friendly, but I would love to see Los Gatos building put an emphasis on that, since we are going to be building so many buildings in the next few years, to really take into account the environment and the impact we are making. I also have some safety concerns specifically for the underground parking, as Amy mentioned. There is some already activity in the park near our homes, and the arson that was at this building. And just as you were talking about, I agree with the previous resident about the increased traffic and parking on Carlton. I see people do it all the time where they park on Carlton and go into the Trader Joe's or other stores at that strip mall. And that road is already fairly narrow and curvy to have that much parking going along. And then my last point is actually just a question. We've referred several times to the photo of the mountaintops with the snow on it, the view from Long Ridge Road. And as somebody pointed out, that the story poles are too tall right now. And I was wondering if there was a rendering of a photo with those lower from that view or any other view than the very limited view by Rotten Robbie. And I don't know if anybody submitted that type of photo.
Thank you. We'll answer that after. We don't want to use up your time.
Okay, I'm all done.
Okay, thank you very much. And that closes our public section as far as that goes, and we'll now turn back to the applicant. I believe you have up to 5 minutes to address whatever you wish.
Thank you. My name is Ken Rodriguez, and I'd like to try to address a few of the comments that came up either from the council or the public. If I could get the site plan maybe back up, that would, oh, fantastic. Thank you. Doesn't want to move. There we go. Thank you. There are some issues, I think, on Carlton, which you can see from this slide that there are cars parked here. What they do is they park here, they walk up this walkway and into Trader Joe's. It is very convenient parking, unfortunately. What we tried to do to eliminate that with this project is there are no doors proposed anywhere along this area. We purposely did that because at other neighborhood meetings that we had, those were comments that came up. There is a screen wall that's existing right now that's 6 feet high that will remain. It starts here, it runs all the way along here behind the trees. We're proposing to extend it all the way up to here. No one would park on this street, walk up here, across here, and all the way around and over to here, when you could park anywhere in the site. Another thing that we did in terms of the parking is we actually overparked this site just slightly. We added an additional 10 cars from the previous plan, and that is in the garage. Some members of the public were worried about the crime area in the garage. Let me just say the difference between a public and a private garage are significant. Downtown, the reason we have open garages they're for the public. They're not gated. There's no security control to them. This particular project would have a complete gate. Right here you can see the dotted area. So this would be closed off, and any evening hours, after hours, would not be used by anyone. They have full security, both in cameras and card key access. So any of the people working in the building obviously could come in, open the gate, drive down in. But this is a first-class office/retail building, and security will not be an issue below grade. There was a question if this project is LEED certified. This project will be LEED certified. Sandhill Property, in fact, all of the projects I'm working on for them are LEED certified, and we've applied for LEED certification. So this will be a green building, one of the first ones to be built in Los Gatos in terms of its mixture of uses. The last thing in terms of the noise from the neighborhood or to the neighborhood, I really just disagree with one of the comments that there will be noise into this building, more noise from Scheme A. This is a sound wall completely around the project. Another one here. The building is captured, the sound is captured in the building. There will be more noise from Carlton, from street traffic, than there ever could be from outdoor seating, such as Viva Restaurant. I mean, that would be the type of seating that would happen out in front of this building. It's just not going to happen. And all I can say is I'd love some acoustical engineer to tell me different than that, but mine has told me that's not the case. And with that, I would conclude my comments and ask the council to approve the project tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. That will end his time, and now we will go to staff, to council questions of Mr. Rodriguez before council discusses among itself. So we'll start out. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. A couple of the public speakers referred to Cornerstone.
Yes.
Do you happen to know the height of Cornerstone, the facade there?
Yes. It varies anywhere from...
Not counting the tall element on the corner. I'm more concerned about
the tall element is 35 feet, exactly, because that's the height limit. And it ranges anywhere from about 22 feet all the way up to the 35 feet and everything in between. And if you recall, when we designed that project, we were trying to stretch the buildings, i.e. Whole Foods and Rite Aid, which at the time was the other drug before.
Thrifty.
Thank you, Thrifty, to make them look taller and a little bit more commercial-like. And then we also had portions that looked very residential. So, and I see the scale of this project as being very similar to this project.
Okay. If I may. Yes. The second question I had, you referred to doing a flat roof treatment on that one-story section.
Yes.
Because I don't want to design from the dais. Are you comfortable with that as an option architecturally?
Very comfortable with that. I think we have a lot of sloped roof all along this part of the building, and we should, because as you can see, just about every building along here has a sloped roof. I think that'd be consistent with the neighborhood. Out here, a variety of maybe some sloped roof back in here and here, where we don't block the views, could also be appropriate. And then a flat parapet would work very nicely with this trellis system that we have for the outdoor seating. So I'm very comfortable with it.
Could you go to that slide, the rendering, for a moment?
Come on. It doesn't like to go backward. There we go, right there.
Okay. So if you could highlight that for me for a second on the bottom left.
Right here.
What is that height right now as it's drawn?
If you give me just a second, I will be accurate with it.
Bless you.
That is roughly 22 feet.
Okay, and if you do the flat roof out there, that would bring it down to what?
Well, anywhere from about 17 to 18, 19 feet.
So somewhere between 3 and 5 feet is what we shave off the top.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you look there, that's just about the height of that that roof treatment. So if you could imagine drawing a straight line across here, you would see that much more of the hillside, which would be very consistent with that. And
okay, thank you. I can.
Vice Mayor McNutt.
Oh, you remembered. Thank you.
I've got. Never mind. How does that go?
Can we go back to the site layout slide, please? So I kind of want to walk through again the neighbor's concern about parking on Carlton. So let's suppose you park on Carlton. So you're going to go access up by Trader Joe's, because otherwise you have to go up through the dirt.
Yeah, this
right?
is the only access point right here.
Well, unless you want to
right
go through the dirt. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you'd walk across the parking lot. What kind of barrier or fence or landscaping do you have planned between the two properties?
We have a full sound wall here that's a continuation of this sound wall. So there would be zero access anywhere in here to the project. We also have a hedge proposed. There's an existing hedge there, We're proposing a hedge all along here also. I'd love to have some visual ties to the project. I think that's appropriate. They're both similar types of project. If there was any access proposed, it could be up in here, or common access, and that was some suggestions by the neighborhood also, and the Planning Commission at their meeting. So if we did propose any commonality or connection, if it was up in here, that would discount, I think, all of this parking and that movement.
And then if you can show me on the building where the entry doors are located.
Right here. It's the only entry door here. There might be one or two more located underneath the arcade, which is along here. But all of the doors are located here and only here, so that we don't have that penetration from Carlton or Gateway.
Okay. And I understand about the access, because that was one of the questions that I had when we met, because it seemed initially like a good idea to link projects for walkability.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it does open more conveyance between the two, which can be a problem. And then you also have people crossing the path to the underground parking, which might not be a safe thing. So,
yeah, I
so
think
I understand.
You're right.
I understand both sides of that issue.
And I think we're comfortable to, either fence this off and then hedge it so that the hedge grows up and covers the fencing, so that all you see is over the top of a 4 or 5 foot hedge. We would be happy with that condition. Or if you wanted a connection, I would suggest it up in this area.
That's all for now, Mayor.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought that there was a proposal made by Planning Commissioner Erickson that was interesting, and it talked about a continuity of pedestrian alley, if you will, from your site all the way through the rest of the potential sites.
Yes.
Wherein we're trying to encourage a pedestrian-friendly environment, and I think that's forward-thinking.
Yes.
I'd like to hear your comment to that.
Well, I think if we're talking about a walkable boulevard, and I do believe the boulevard will get there. I mean, that's the thing that's on everybody's agenda right now. Connections between projects, both out here and here, are going to be important. And I'm sympathetic to exactly what the neighborhood is asking for, too. I think part of that can be solved with, how this is handled, and even the parking here. Maybe that's restricted parking like we do in downtown. Maybe it's a minute, whatever, an hour parking, 90 minutes, I don't know what it would be. But I think working with the neighborhood, this developer could solve that problem that his tenant has created. But I think a connection across here and onto any of these other properties as we go down is going to be very important to this pedestrian activity. If you can't walk the boulevard or between projects, it's not walkable. And I think that's everything we're trying to get the boulevard to be. I'd be shot for fear of this, but I'd love to take 2 lanes out of the boulevard, create some on-street parking, try to get people to get out of their cars and walk along there. I think those are the kind of ideas we're going to need to have during the general plan and the Los Gatos Boulevard study to try to get this link to work. I hope I answered that.
You did answer the question, if I might continue.
Please.
I know there's some anxiety being expressed by some members of the neighborhood about some of the potential impacts. They seem to center primarily on cut-through traffic as a result of the boulevard being at certain points in the day over-intensified, and also the parking on Carlton. I would be willing to look at this whole question of parking on the west side of Carlton, since the neighbors are saying it's not residents. I mean, there's some assumption that it's not residents, and so I'll go with that assumption, but we could red curb that whole section down there, and I'd like to see what kind of neighborhood response we get. I think one of the things that we're looking at here is how we protect the neighborhood, and at the same time, those people who live in this neighborhood, I'm sure knew that they were living next to or moving into a commercial residential interface. It's not a surprise. And every time we do something that has potential impacts, wittingly or knowingly, then we take on the consequences of that. It's our job to make sure that the commercial residential somehow interfaces in a positive way. I disagree with some of the perceptions that, well, there just must be this absolute divide. And my concern about the boulevard progression, and there's a question to this, but my concern is that we perhaps dumb down the possibilities of our boulevard plan, which call for pedestrian access and a friendly pedestrian environment. Because the end result is if we do that, then we miss a potential opportunity to enhance the boulevard. The boulevard is never going to be the El Camino. It's never going to be Stevens Creek. We have committed ourselves to that. The boulevard plan is intact. It continues to be a great reference for us. But for me, we are going to have to be looking at perhaps losing a couple of lanes on the boulevard, of creating more bicycle and pedestrian space out there on the boulevard, of starting to become more intelligent in the way we define the boulevard, rather than to see the boulevard as it is right now as the basic product we're going to produce for the future. My question is really, how would you accomplish this issue that was raised in the Planning Commission about an internal pedestrian pathway within the context of the issues that have been raised out here tonight in maintaining the separation of those two sites?
And let me give that in the context of how to make this retail and pedestrian friendly. And that would be that along this area, this arcade that we set up, and this connection, that to me is the home run. Because now you have pedestrians walking across here, you have pedestrians walking out here. They're close enough and far enough apart where they'll both work. One, how many people like to stroll along the shop fronts and look into shop fronts? That gives you that option. Other people like to stroll along a boulevard, which I hope is just loaded with trees, and as you said, is slower, has some character to it, and is something unique and memorable that everybody can remember as they come into Los Gatos. I mean, we all have visions of towns, and I showed you some in earlier sketches when we were the public hearing when we were talking about the boulevard. But I see this tree-lined LA that's second to none. But I do think that one thing that you could do back here, this Carlton is not going to be the only interface. If you go across the west side of the boulevard up here, we have residential that backs up to that retail too. I really think it's these kind of projects, and I take a little bit of exception when somebody says the developer's not willing to work with the community. Wow. I just don't see that. What happened is at the public hearing, someone from the community suggested, he's gone now, that, put in some speed humps. The developer said, okay, let's do that. That'll help Carlton. Even though there's no exit points back here, no one will ever be parking from this development. We have our own parking and enough of it. I really think that's the community public-private partnership that we need to have. So I think if we could do traffic calming on the edge streets back here and slow this down a bit, I think now you have something that's really walkable. And that's from the neighborhood to the retail, from the retail to the neighborhood.
For now, that's fine.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands at the time, I'll take a shot. We're not discussing 2 lanes down to 1 or narrowing or that type of thing this evening.
Right.
I certainly respect Mr. Brzezinski's ideas about that. That's another evening. We each have our own ideas about that.
Yes.
And I do share your idea, Mr. Rodriguez, as far as a tree-lined boulevard one day. But beyond that, I don't know. In listening to you speak and listening to the public speak, I had 5 items that I starred that were important to me, and I just want to confirm these things with you, especially since we lost a number of the people that were here. Hopefully they're at home watching on TV right now. One is the existing orange netting that's there now. The highest netting is 2.5 feet higher than option A. I believe well, you did. You confirmed that earlier, so that was good. Secondly, in your slide with the 4 locations that I referred to earlier, and the bottom left one, you talked about a parapet roof going down there. If you can go back to that.
So it would be backward a couple of
So these are things that are important to me, and I believe we have consent from you or agreement with you on these items, and that's important to me as this project moves forward. First is that the netting that's there is higher than what is before us this evening, so that gives more of a view specifically here from Long Ridge Road is one site. Secondly is the bottom left corner there. I prefer the view of the mountain on the bottom right, but I prefer the option A because of the shape that it makes of the center and for a number of different reasons, architectural and design-wise. So the idea that you can put a parapet wall there, and Mr. Rice asked you, without conceding any architectural elegance, I think that's wonderful.
Yes.
Number
I want to be
3,
clear on that.
Number 3 was, we heard from several people about slowing and diverting the community benefit. The concerns from the public that I heard, Mr. Rodriguez, were the effects on the neighborhood. And I don't want to approve a project that comes in that has unavoidable adverse effects on a neighborhood. The reality is, as Mr. Prudzinski brought up, development's happening. You know, these car dealerships have been there for 50 years. Car dealerships are going away. They're being replaced by something else that will outlast all of us that live here this evening. And it's up to us to make sure that whatever comes in there is the best that we can do.
Yes.
We have height limitations and setbacks and all the rest, and I understand your project doesn't exceed any of those. And even though you're at the height, I appreciate your agreeing to lower that bottom left front elevation there, so view of the mountain with that parapet.
Yes.
Okay, so that the mountain is visible. The other thing I appreciate is your willingness as a community benefit to help address the concerns on Carlton and Gateway. I am glad to hear you called them no exit points on Carlton and Gateway. Well, that kind of tied into what I said earlier. If there was a 6 or an 8 foot wall in front of me, I'm not parking there, and I'm going to park to where I can walk in.
That's right.
The other thing I like, and it was the video store on Blossom Hill on Los Gatos Boulevard, okay, where it comes right up to the sidewalk, and it looks like a door should be there.
As it should have been.
And there is no door there, so that doesn't serve, it's not functional.
Right.
Okay? If you put doors and entrances to the businesses that you hope to have in your building on Gateway and Carlton, that would encourage parking on Gateway and Carlton. And that would be a problem for the neighborhood.
It would be awful. It would be
Okay,
a
so the
bad
fact you have
planning
no,
principle.
the fact you have no exit points, there's no logical reason to park there, okay, because there's no way to get in. And
That's
you've
right.
got to walk around hundreds of feet of walls.
That's right.
In order to find a door to get in.
That's correct.
So this is true. There's not going to be, on anything that comes in, retail, restaurant, whatever.
No.
Not going to be any doors exiting out there on.
Already made that commitment to both the commission and the neighborhood.
Okay, so that's addressing the concern that I had, was the impact on the neighborhood. I don't want to add to what they're already experiencing. Now, I'd also like to take advantage of the offer that you've made directly and indirectly. Your project, to me, given the design, won't add to the difficulties that the neighborhood's experiencing, but I know, you've always said you're willing to help out with the problems they've got there. An average speed of 31, where speeds are 25, or I believe it was mentioned 20 miles an hour, even further down Carlton. Whatever that may be, through traffic engineering and all the rest. That's very important to me.
And me too.
Okay, so I just gave a little speech, but I got your nodding in agreement of public record, and you two have just agreed all that's been said.
We just agreed. Yes.
We just agreed.
We just agreed. The developer,
right then,
who unfortunately has to fund that, but wants to.
I appreciate that. So
Yes.
I'm looking at that option A as being the best option by our staff, by our consulting architect, et cetera, and having no additional impact on Carlton and Gateway. And then in addition, you're looking to help remedy some of the concerns that the residents we've heard tonight have expressed.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council. Questions on Mr. Prudzinski?
I have a question for the applicant, whichever. This is a reflection through the wonders of technology, a couple of pieces of language I requested of the attorney that we might add to conditions if we choose to move forward with this tonight. I want to ask you two things. The first is in the condition number 3, which relates to the uses. Did a quick calculation on the first floor, and approximately 1/3 of the square footage on the first floor could be devoted to retail and/or restaurant. That would come to 8,500 square feet approximately. Actually, 8,500's rounded up from 8,337 or something like that. Would it be a condition that we could impose that would in effect guarantee a portion of the first floor to be designated and maintained as retail and restaurant, and the others maintain your options? And I do believe that the way you approach the option issue of uses does work and seems appropriate to the environment at this time, but I'd like you to consider that. You don't necessarily have to respond right now, but we're talking about 8,500 square feet. And then the second condition would be related to this traffic calming, and it would include new traffic calming crosswalk at Carlton and Gateway leading to the park, combined with additional traffic calming devices to be determined by the town upon consultation with the community for an additional amount to be paid by the applicant not to exceed $25,000. I think we did a quick calculation, saw that the speed bumps or speed humps would come in at about 17, something like that, and then the addition would bring it up to allow us to do the crosswalk as well. So those would be two additional specific conditions or amendments to conditions that we might add. Now, again, you can discuss it among yourselves, or you can mull that for a period of time.
So if we can start with the second one first.
Okay.
That's something that we can certainly agree to.
Okay.
Working with the town and something subject to the community and the town engineer, absolutely. That's
All right.
not a problem.
Appreciate that.
The second.
The first
item is, right. So our specific question, do you know the square footage is for here? Okay. The concern that we would have regarding that specific square footage is the actual layout for the building itself. We understand from a third standpoint or from a percentage standpoint, it gets to a certain configuration that may be suitable for the traffic, but from an actual layout standpoint and who would we be able to bring in for that type of square footage, I think Ken can better address where we'd be able to divide that, make it more of a divisible location so it would be, I guess, successful retail. We just don't want to have retail for the sake of retail. We want to make sure that it's actually configured in such a way where it has a chance to bring in a tenant.
Mr. Dare, why don't you confer and come up with a number that take your moment and go ahead and do that.
Okay.
So you can answer Mr. Brzezinski's question.
I appreciate that.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, when staff played with some of this language, it was to try to identify what we thought would be a workable retail restaurant space, probably on the northwest leg of the building that approaches the corner. So there may be a better division point for that separate structure that doesn't have a second story to it.
So regarding that specific number, we were looking at the actual layout. If we can go down to 5,000 square feet on that edge, then we would be able to actually break it up potentially into 2 users or to have 1 restaurant use or 1 retail use. 8,500 square feet kind of gets us caught in the between. So 5,000 square feet would be something that we'd be able to support.
Now, my assumption, and this is a minimum, okay, we're not saying that make it 5,000 square feet, okay, and the 8,500 was intended as the minimum as well. I think one of the issues we have to address in our discussion is how significant retail and restaurant is to us, because what you're proposing, technically speaking, could be all office. I mean, you're talking about a mix of uses, but with the complete flexibility that you're requesting, it could end up an office building, pure and simple. And I think we need to ask the council what the preference is. This council member would prefer to have more of a mix, and I think a restaurant would be exceptional there. It bookends Viva on the other side of the boulevard, and a very successful neighborhood restaurant. I noticed that in the planning commission meeting, someone asked for a donut shop and bicycle racks. Probably doable. I don't know if that fits into the 8,500 or 5,000. You'd have to kind of work with that.
A donut shop would be good.
Oh yes, of course. And the police station is right down the block too.
Cool.
So. But for purposes of our conclusion tonight, if you wouldn't continue to consider that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. I think what I'll do is, Mr. Dare, is continue with what Mr. Pruszynski has started. He's talking about conditions that would make this project agreeable to him or important to him. Along with those same conditions, to me, and Mr. Rodriguez, I need whatever your definition is of calling that a parapet wall on that whatever elevation, however that needs to be worded, that needs to be a condition for me, so that view of the mountain is maximized. So I need whatever wording to come from you to be proposed to us to do that. Mr. Pruszynski has already touched on the money for the traffic improvements. That was great. I certainly don't envision a stroll down the boulevard with my bride to see office space. So what he's saying about retail and restaurants makes sense. That's what we envision on the boulevard. I believe each of the other points I brought up, gentlemen, you've already agreed to, and Mr. Korb would not require a change of any type, correct? Because what I've been told by Mr. Rodriguez is that there are no exit points. That's not a change. That's in the plans. And what we've been told by Mr. Rodriguez, well, for instance, the parking lot closing at night, okay, is that in there? Does that need to be spelled out? Because I would certainly like to have that as a condition.
It's not a condition right now.
Okay. So what I'm looking for, Mr. Dare and Mr. Rodriguez, are wording proposed from you to us that addresses the parapet wall for the mountain view on option A, and also addresses the closure for security purposes for the underground parking. You've already said it will be LEED certified, and you've said there are no exit points, and that does it for me. So I need that wording from you whenever you wish.
Okay, I'd like to try this, that the one-story portion of the building that fronts Los Gatos Boulevard and Gateway, that the parapet not exceed a height of 19 feet. And that, just so you know, is similar to a condition that was placed on the project north of this by the Planning Commission.
Okay, Mr. Rice asked you earlier, the current height of that is 22?
To 24, yes.
Okay, so that's a 3 to 5 foot.
Yes.
Okay, so one-story portion that fronts Gateway and Los Gatos Boulevard, that the parapet not exceed 19 feet.
Yes.
Okay.
Then in terms of the underground parking, that all underground parking be secured at the time of closure of the retail shops or, the businesses, so that it not be open after those hours of operation, which I think is already in the report, hours of operation. No?
No, because my concern there would be the restaurant.
Yeah.
Alcohol, 11 o'clock, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So do you need the underground parking open for the whole time after the retail is closed?
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
The hours of operation of any prospective restaurant could be handled through the conditional use permit, and since that's not a proposed use at this time, it would just be an allowed use. I would recommend that's the best way to handle it. I also think the parapet and the roofing could be direction to staff for inclusion in the A&S process, rather than trying to condition that at this point. However, upon further staff review of the plans, we would recommend that the retail or restaurant space be specified for the corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Carlton and Gateway, excuse me, Los Gatos Boulevard and Gateway, and we think 5,000 would be pretty minimal, and a larger size would create that retail presence on the boulevard that's been part of the boulevard plan and other discussions.
Thank you. Yes.
If I could just speak to the first two, Mr. Larson, those are excellent suggestions. I totally forgot about the CUP process for the restaurant, so thank you very much. Likewise, the security elements. And I'll let Mr. Dare talk to the size.
I just conferred with Mr. Rodriguez regarding, as you had mentioned, having a restaurant like Viva. My understanding is Viva is about 6,000 square feet. So as a condition to the point where restaurant or retail would be at a minimum of 6,000 square feet would allow us to bring in that type of restaurant, and obviously more retail should the market be able to support that. So 6,000 square feet would be able to provide that bookend, as you will.
Okay.
Council, looking for discussion. Thank you. If you'll have a seat. Let's close the public hearing. Thank you, Vice Mayor McNutt. And now it turns to council discussion. Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start it. A number of items are brought up tonight by the public, well received. You know, I know that probably there's some feeling out there, and I noticed when Mr. Moffett left that there was this concern that, well, it's a done deed. But I want to make sure that we have a clarity here. It wasn't a done deed till now, and it's not yet a done deed, and and that's a guarantee. From my point of view, I need to make sure that some of the things I saw reflected in the Planning Commission I respond to. First question, is that a precedent? Does this building set precedent for the rest of the development on the boulevard? The answer is no. Each project is de novo, handled at the time of an application, and there is no precedent that is set. Therefore, an applicant can't come in and say, well, on the Gateway and Boulevard project, you did this, so you got to do this for me at Los Gatos Almaden on the Boulevard. It doesn't work that way. It won't happen. It's not the way the game is played. Second of all, there was a comment in the Planning Commission meeting regarding the various documents that we use to reference what we plan to do in the boulevard. And I think some of the confusion in that last Planning Commission meeting related to insertion of questions about whether or not the boulevard plan, the Los Gatos general plan, the commercial design guidelines are extant for our use in this case and all other cases. No question about it. They are well-developed plans. They are not in their nascent stage. They have been used and will continue to be used as our guide for what we want to do on the boulevard. In particular, I've got a list of about 31 policies excerpted from the general plan, all of which, and some of which have contradictions within themselves, because that's the way general plans are written, where some issues need to be addressed in one way, other issues in another way. But the fact is that if you look at the boulevard plan in the context of the general plan, you'll see that there is a cohesion of proposals, and that they are very usable for developing projects on the boulevard. And this leads me to the question of moratorium, which was also raised at the Planning Commission. I did a little bit of research with staff because there was some implication that a moratorium had occurred before we did the Hillside Specific Plan. We went back 20 years. We could not find anything like that. There were two moratoria that were raised in the last 20 years. One was in relationship to your neighborhood, actually, and that was the proposal for some cell sites on the PG&E towers that went through your neighborhood. And we addressed that and eventually came to a moratorium on cell sites until we could work out language that allowed us to have some control, because the federal government had gone a long ways towards towards excluding local control from the insertion of cell sites. And we gained that back by our moratorium and then by the language that we created, and I think it benefited us. I know it benefited your community because I was walking my dog in the Live Oak Manor Park, and there are no cell sites up there on the tower right now. The other issue about moratorium was the question of in the central business district, the restriction we placed on personal businesses, nail shops, hair salons. We inserted a moratorium. This council inserted a moratorium for a period of time because we had no controls over what a property owner could do to bring a tenant in, and we had this kind of huge inflow of potential clients for nails and hair throughout the downtown. We would certainly, that would be a kind of a magnet, I'm sure, for the rest of the valley if we not had the ability to control that. We put the moratorium in place. We came up with language that allowed us to use the conditional use permit, and we in effect protected the balance. The point of moratorium, I think, is clear, and that is we don't put it in place every time we have a feeling that there's a complex issue. We put it in place in instances where we don't have control and where our lack of legal ability to intervene has been either removed or is not present in our language, and it gives us a time to create that control. But it's not used whimsically, and it's certainly not used in a situation where we've got plenty of documentation that direct the development on the boulevard. I also heard in the Planning Commission's final decision, which was a recommendation for denial, that there was an orientation towards option A, not option B, and I think the mayor has indicated his own preference there at this point, but that it was not consistent with the plans, that is, general plan, boulevard plan, commercial design guidelines, primarily on the basis of hillside views. Now, this is a complicated issue because we all love the hillsides, and we would never want to eliminate our views of the hillsides. It's a question of where are you standing, where are you driving, what are you looking at, and the whole boulevard plan asks for view corridors or opportunities to see our hillside, our mountain behind us, because it is an integral part of our community. We would not be the same without it. Now, we are dedicated to preservation of those views, but those views are relative depending on where you're standing. If I'm standing right up next to the wall of the building, I bet I can't see the mountain. And one of the things that I discovered as I've been looking at this issue is that throughout the town, probably the greatest impact on our views of the hillside of the mountain are the trees. And it's this community of trees, this urban forest that we have. If you actually step back and take a look at what we've got, it's this combination of treescape that enhances the views of the mountains, and they provide corridors or viewscapes for us. At any place on a boulevard, if you don't see the mountain from one spot, but you drive 20 feet further south, you will see the mountain. And I think that we have to be very careful about our determination that we are blocking views of the hillsides when, what we've got in this town is a very complex architectural development. And if we had an absolute prohibition of any view of the hillside block, then I think, frankly, there would be an awful lot of downtown that would not be built, because the downtown has, by its nature, provided some blockage to the hillside view. So those are my reflections on the Planning Commission. I think they did a yeoman's job, but I think there was some confusion raised when they started to talk about the various plans and what those plans indicated for direction of travel. And so with that, I feel very comfortable that we probably can move forward with this tonight.
No other comments to Vice Mayor McNutt?
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, there are comments, just a matter of who wants to speak next. We take a long time to do anything in Los Gatos, and we don't actually have a lot of change, and we are being faced with the potential for significant change on the boulevard, and it's making us all uneasy and uncomfortable. And I think that was clearly reflected in the transcripts that I read of the Planning Commission, both of the commissioners, certainly of the residents, and I think even staff. It's just speeding up and coming faster than we have time to absorb all of our fears and try to figure out what do we really need to be concerned about, and how are we going to handle this. Tonight was a really good discussion of what we always face when we have a development proposal, which is these competing values. So on one hand, we say we really want to have residents that are located near commercial area to be able to access that commercial area. I imagine everyone on Carlton, as some of the people mentioned, they love being able to walk over to Trader Joe's. On the other hand, they don't like the impact on their neighborhood of people parking there and accessing Trader Joe's. So they want the connection, but the connection causes a problem. We don't want to have the strip mall look with big surface parking lots. And yet we're still uncomfortable with underground parking. That's something that is relatively new and infrequently in use in Los Gatos. And certainly if you talk about underground parking for specifically for retail, that's different for us. We don't like a blighted parcel left there undeveloped, and yet we're concerned if it's going to be developed. So we're constantly going back and forth and trying to balance those needs, those tensions, and figure out what's the right way to go. As Mr. Przinsky said, we're fortunate that we do have the general plan, the commercial design guidelines, the boulevard plan that will help us as we deal with this fast-moving change. And I believe that we instructed, when we reviewed the boulevard plan a few months ago, we instructed staff to do some further enhancement and clarification of it, specifically as it relates to views and views of what. We do live in a valley, so there are mountains that surround us, about 75, 80%. So which views, from what positions. I've been making my husband drive me around a lot lately so that I can look at the views, because it's not a wise thing to do when you're driving. And it's just amazing to me where you see a view and where you don't. Los Gatos Boulevard at the southern end, there are no views of the hills because those trees are just everywhere. So once you get south of Blossom Hill, it's really very difficult to see anything other than trees and homes. Well, that's appropriate for that particular section. As you move north, the only hills and mountains that you see are on the east foothills of San Jose, and it's straight ahead unless you crook your neck around. So, what views and from what viewpoint is going to be something that needs a lot of discussion and definition as we go forward. But I don't think that we can just automatically say there's going to be a change in what currently exists, and therefore we can't do anything, because the same change could be done by putting up tall trees just around that property, and it would have the same kind of impact. I also want to emphasize, as Mr. Przinsky did, this idea of precedent. It does not hold that there is any, the applicant can say, well, you did this here and therefore you should do the same thing in my property, but we are not beholden to that. And the parcels in all of Los Gatos, but especially along the boulevard, are so different depending on which part it is and what it backs up to, that they have to be looked at individually to determine what is right for that particular parcel and how is it going to impact who's to the right, who's to the left, and who's behind it. The retail use, and the applicant can verify that I have really whined about this all through this process. It's very difficult for me to think of this not being primarily retail, because that was always in my vision as to what would happen with this land, maybe some office up above, but primarily retail. So it's taken me a while to work through the possibility that maybe there needs to be some flexibility that can go back and forth between office and retail, depending on the marketability. I think I'm okay if the applicant is okay with having a minimum number of square footage that must be retail at the front. I'm concerned in two ways. One is not to arbitrarily pick a figure that doesn't work for the world of retail, because they do work in certain segments of space, and also to make sure that it's marketable. I remember before I came on council, there was a project farther down on the boulevard that had requirement that it be retail, and they had a terrible time getting retail tenants in there, and it was empty for a long time, and it's been an ongoing struggle between that building and the town as to, well, what is retail, what can we actually get in here, and I don't really want to set us up to have those very difficult discussions and legal issues as we go forward. And lastly, I do think that we can move this forward tonight. I think that the option A meets best the goals of the general plan, the boulevard plan, commercial design guidelines, and I think with the conditions that we have already described, we just need to work out this retail square footage requirement, and the other direction that we've given the applicant, that it's going to be a very workable project that in the end is going to suit all of our needs.
Thank you, Vice Mayor McNutt. We'll defer to the lady. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rice. As other council members have pointed out, we had a tremendous amount of information on this application. And we have all, including I, have studied it very carefully and very intensely. And first of all, I want to thank the Planning Commission for the depth of consideration that they gave this. Every single person on that Planning Commission was a wealth of information, causing me to think in ways I may not have thought. I want to thank Mr. Paulson for his grounded, centered input to the council and to the commission. And I want to thank the applicant for also providing a tremendous amount of information. And what that information indicated to me, because Ms. McNutt took one way of analysis and I took another, which was, to me, it was unraveling one layer from the other. Because the way this project goes is, first of all, you have the project itself in a vacuum, and in that, what the Planning Commission and what we have been doing is looking at the mass of the building and its location on the site. So that is the project in a vacuum. If you take it out one step further, you have the project vis-a-vis its neighbors, and at that point you're looking at safety and traffic. Take it out one step further, you have the project on the boulevard, and there you have the issue of views of the hillside and of traffic. And then you take it out one step further, and this has been a fast-moving train for us, which is that this project, along with many others moving right along, we have a time in our history when we have a lot of projects potentially coming along on very large parcels on the boulevard. So that is moving along what we're doing and the analysis that needs to be given to these projects. Now, I understand that at the Planning Commission level, there was discussion about the amount of time and effort and expense that this applicant has put into this project, and I totally agree. But there's also the fact that we now have, we the town council, we the planning commission, we who are involved in planning, we now have both an opportunity and a challenge, and I think that we should meet it first with this project. Not a long drawn out analysis. And so that's what I was trying to do over the weekend as I was going through all these pieces of paper. What is it that can be done that is reasonable to these 4 levels of issues that we have, with which we have been dealing? And my thought is that there are 2 that step forward. One is traffic on the boulevard, and the reason that is important is because it impacts the traffic in the neighborhoods, it impacts parking. We can say that the only thing that we need to look at is Swanson Ford project at Blossom Hill and Los Gatos Boulevard. But I think to approve this project and not pay attention to the fact that you have the Chevrolet dealership that has at a minimum been before CDAC, and the fact that you have the potential for Honda, and I have to say that may be vacated, and it's not as far as long as Chevrolet. What I would do, if I were the planning god of Los Gatos, is I would take an expedited analysis of traffic, and I would include the Chevrolet dealership. I would have a second level including Honda, but I would definitely have the Chevrolet dealership. And I would also take the Los Gatos Boulevard plan, which this council has directed staff to look at various elements. One is the vista, the views of the mountains. I would take those 2 things, the traffic and the views of the mountains from the Los Gatos Boulevard. I would study that. I would take time in July when we are not having council meetings. I would take those 2 elements, I would review them, I would come back to the council, and then I would look at this project within the context of those 2 issues. I am very uncomfortable with moving forward with this application without putting it into a context of those 2 issues, especially given the fact that we have projects going down the line. And, people can say, yeah, but those other ones aren't approved, those other ones aren't before the planning department. As a practical matter, it is the lead agency, i.e. the town of Los Gatos, that makes the determination as to what projects, what parcels of land, what applications, what pending applications, what conceptual applications we fold into our traffic analysis.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try not to get too repetitive on some of the things, but I do want to at least confirm my belief on a couple of the things. One being no project sets a precedent regardless, this or any other one. I am not in favor of a moratorium on the boulevard in any manner, shape, or form at this time. One of the other things that I read in the transcript of the Planning Commission meetings, comment was made about maybe we should be waiting until the general plan update is done, and we have a general plan that we're working with. It gets updated every decade, so we're always going to be waiting for the next general plan, and I don't think that's a reasonable way to go. A couple things on the specific project. It meets all the guidelines, as I read them, of the general plan and the Los Gatos Boulevard plan and the commercial design guidelines. It's before us as a planned development because of our own policies on projects of a certain size and former car dealers. So it would not be in the planned development process if it were not for the policies that we have set forth. I think they're good policies, but it's not a planned development because because the project is going to exceed or be outside of our normal bounds of planning. I think that another thing is that when we look at these documents, we have guidelines there that this project falls into, and then to say, well, now we're going to change them after a developer or a property owner in good faith brings forth a project, that sets a that's a concern of mine. I think I already pretty much addressed that option A, I think, fits better with the site. It fits better with the boulevard plan. I like the offer of the flat roof treatment with the parapet on the front section because I think that is a good compromise. I'm conscious of the neighborhood's concerns and their feeling that option B might provide better sound buffering, but I tend to look at if the way it fits the property and also continues a flow with the property next door. I think option A is better, and with the sound walls that are there as well as proposed, I just can't believe the noise is going to enter the neighborhood. A lot of the comments that were brought up tonight by the public are absolutely accurate. The traffic and the parking on Carlton. The Village Square project, I think Vice Mayor McNutt hit the nail on the head. The residents get the benefit of the pedestrian access. They lose some of the privacy caused by that access. That's not the fault of this project, but yet this project is going to address it to some extent with traffic calming and the raised side crosswalk as well. And I think that's the definition of a community benefit. It doesn't affect the project that's being proposed, but it benefits the immediate neighborhood. And I think that's a great thing, as well as the re-landscaping that awful-looking traffic median on Gateway. The only other thing that I really struggled with is this mix of retail versus office, and if I was the planning god of Los Gatos, I'd like to see that entire first floor as retail, because I really think that's what is called for in that space. But economic realities are economic realities. If I was a retailer, I don't know how I would pass up the property that's at Larkin, the Boulevard right now, that's been sitting vacant for several months. But I'm not a business or retail business owner, and people are obviously passing it up. I think the location's great, the visibility is great, and it's a beautiful building. You can't dictate market economics. If 7,000 feet is where we're going to set as a minimum, I can live with that. Would I like it to be more? Absolutely. But I tend to be in the camp that thinks this project can move forward this evening. I want to finish, if I may, with just something that came out of the transcript that jumped out at me. And this was a quote from Planning Commission Chair O'Donnell. And this was from the meeting of May 13th of the Planning Commission. He says, "The tension is that if we build something there that would make the neighbors on Gateway," and I assume he means Carlton, "really happy, the question then becomes, how does it look to the tens of thousands of people who will be using the boulevard? There's a tension there because I believe if I lived on Gateway, I would want something that people driving down Los Gatos Boulevard might not want. And certainly the plan we have now for Los Gatos Boulevard does not envision." And I think that captures it very succinctly. Councilmember Pruszynski referred to an interface area between residential and commercial. And I believe the project that we're looking at is very sympathetic, and the applicant has been very cognizant and listened very carefully to the neighborhood and has done the best job that they can to make that interface as soft as possible.
Thank you, and as is our practice, I'll bring up the rear as the mayor. First of all, I think it's important, it's interesting as you hear this and you think about the history. I've been here 35 years. I know there's people been here longer than that. But when the car dealerships lined Los Gatos Boulevard, they didn't want trees in front of them because that would obstruct the view of their cars. When people drove by, they want to see their cars for sale and the prices on the windows and stuff. So that's the way it's always been. Now we have a vision of maybe a tree-lined boulevard one day, whether or not it's pedestrian-friendly or 4 lanes or 2 lanes or I don't know what. but a tree-lined boulevard. And as Mr. Brzezinski brought up, by putting those trees right on the sidewalk, people driving up and down north and south on Los Gatos Boulevard won't be able to see the trees, the mountains, east and west. You'll only be able to see at the end of the tunnel of trees. And it's kind of ironic that trees block mountains if that's done. That's not where we are tonight. Where we are tonight, from my perspective, is that we've got a piece of property whose use has changed. That's one issue. We also have a neighborhood who has issues. But that property being developed or not being developed doesn't change the issues that that neighborhood has. What I wanted to make sure of, and I think I made myself clear, was I wanted to make sure any development didn't increase the problems in the neighborhood. And for a number of reasons, I believe that's the case. Then, as a community benefit, as is our practice in the town, I wanted to make sure that anything being developed there helped the neighborhood. Okay? I mean, a community benefit could be, trees and a drinking fountain over on Pollard. That can be a community benefit. It can be a donation to the arts. That can be a community benefit. But this particular community benefit benefits the surrounding neighborhood. I, too, as Mr. Rice said, I like what's happening on Gateway Drive, and I believe, where we are with an amount not exceeding $25,000 to go into traffic improvements relating to Carlton and that immediate area to the satisfaction of our traffic engineers. So I face the reality. I mean, myself, soccer field sounds good to me. Okay? But I don't think that's going to happen. Okay? I don't think that's going to happen. So given that, the reality is it's going to be developed. The reality is on the boulevard belongs retail and office. So a project comes before us, and I want to thank the Planning Commission. This has been before the Planning Commission 3 times. They've done all the heavy lifting. What's come before us tonight is what I call fine-tuning. The issues that are left are ones that I think we've addressed tonight. I, too, share the fact that I think retail belongs there, certainly on the first floor. Mr. Rice just brought up 7,000, which from my notes is a third number, because we had 8,300, we had 5,000, then it was changed to 6,000. I think you're now at 7,000, so we still need to resolve that issue. But what's important to me is that it's a quality project that's developed there. And the fact that the highest orange netting is 2.5 feet higher, so the maximum height will come down 2.5 feet, that the parapet in the front on the elevation that borders Gateway and Los Gatos Boulevard will bring the height of that front elevation 3 to 5 feet down, depending on what areas. Those are important to me. That the underground parking closure with the businesses and stuff, the security that was raised, that's important. That there are no exit points to Gateway and Carlton, which means there's no reason for people to park on Carlton if you got to walk a couple of 100 feet around 6-foot walls, whatever they are. So that property is going to be developed. And none of what is proposed is a variance to any of the guidelines that we have. We say 35 feet, and the developers just agreed to make the front 19 feet. There is no place in this development, to my knowledge, Mr. Paulson, please correct me if I'm wrong, there's no place on this development that exceeds any of our existing guidelines. Los Gatos has rules. We said don't be over 35 feet. Every part of this is under 35 feet. Los Gatos says you need X number of parking spaces. They exceed the number of parking spaces. The community benefits there. I just think overall this is going to provide more diversity for that neighborhood. It's going to provide more shops, another eating alternative, or retail options. And from everything that has been said, I don't think it will add to the traffic on Carlton. And from the money being donated for traffic calming purposes, I think we're going to make it so that it's not attractive to use Carlton as a shortcut and avoid Los Gatos Boulevard as much as possible. I've heard from people here speak tonight that traffic calming measures were taken before. I think it was Ms. Despars that mentioned the neighborhood agreed, somebody else came in and somebody disagreed, and then traffic bumps were put in or humps were put in, and then what we thought was good at the time is not so good at the time. That's certainly a process I understand. But that pretty much summarizes where I'm at. And I look to council for a motion. Mr. Korb, I think I look to you first.
I'm not going to make a motion, but having heard the council comments, it appears that the sense of the majority of the council would be to introduce the ordinance, perhaps with some additional conditions. So I was going to, if you're so inclined, Mr. Mayor, suggest an order of attack so we can get through all of the action items.
Fire away.
The first suggestion I have is that you direct the clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
Okay, and we're doing this before the actual motion.
That's correct.
Okay. So done, Madam Clerk?
Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending the town code affecting a zone change from CH to CHPD for property at 15400 Los Gatos Boulevard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The second thing I'm going to recommend is that someone make a motion and someone second a motion to waive the reading of the body of the ordinance.
So moved.
A motion made by Mr. Rice. We'll need a second. That's a motion made and seconded for waiving the reading. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Next, I'm going to suggest that someone make and someone second a motion to take the following actions. The first would be to make the mitigated negative declaration and adopt the mitigation monitoring plan. Second.
Mr. Corb, this can all be in one motion?
Correct. Second, to make the findings necessary to adopt the zone or introduce the zone change ordinance. The findings are in attachment 8. They concern the traffic impact special benefit condition, and I understand that the community benefit would be contained within the community benefits that are described in the project and that may be modified. We'll discuss that in a moment by additional conditions. But they're basically the traffic calming and landscape improvement and sound wall benefits. And the third item would be to introduce the ordinance with such additional conditions as the commission may wish to, or the council may wish to add. But first, my suggestion is that you get a motion that encapsulates all of those items, get that seconded, and then we can talk about the conditions.
Thank you. I'm looking for Mr. Przinski.
Well, that's pretty standard to the staff report. I'll make a motion to make the mitigated negative declaration, which is contained in attachment 7 of our document, and then adopt the mitigation monitoring plan, which is exhibit 13 of attachment 3. So the attachment 7 is contained in our study, and it's the initial study, 15400 Los Gatos Boulevard, and it's called initial study, as I said, and it's contained in attachment 7. That's the motion.
And you can add to the other items if you wish.
Okay, and I will add the monitoring plan, which is exhibit 13, contained after that. That's exhibit 13, a three-page document that contains the monitoring plan that was contained in attachment 3.
Thank you. Also, we're available to make the findings to introduce the zone change.
Well, certainly we can do that as well.
Mr. Corb, was that what you were going to say?
That's what I was going to say. And the findings, again, would be the community benefit findings for traffic impact, and I was referring to the facts related to that, and the second is consistency with the general plan's specific plan.
If you want to refer to attachment 8 for those, you may. The first is the zone change, the required findings that the proposed zone change is internally consistent with the general plan and the elements of the Los Gatos Boulevard Plan of Commercial Design Guidelines. I think our discussion tonight has validated that. And then, as required by the traffic policy, given the fact that 5 or more trips are indicated in this, that we have to find that it is consistent with the policy, and that there is a mitigating, or rather, benefits plan that is offered, and we will discuss some of the specifics perhaps at a later point in time, including the traffic calming on Carlton.
Thank you. And we also have the ability, I understand, Mr. Korb, is that what you're going to say about introducing the ordinance with conditions?
Right. My understanding is that the motion thus far is to introduce the ordinance as well. Once you have a second, then I think that it's just a question of fine-tuning the additional conditions.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Okay, we have the discussion regarding conditions started with the traffic calming issue. We did draft an additional condition to add. It would be condition number 88. We actually have handed out copies of it.
If you pay attention, I will hand it out.
Okay, very good. But what I'll do is read it into the record as a recommended condition, and I would ask that the maker of the motion and the seconder consider whether to add that condition. It would be a new condition 88, applicant shall install improvements identified as the 4 community benefits on page 4, item K of the Town Council staff report dated May 26, 2009. The new traffic calming crosswalk at the Carlton Avenue and Gateway Drive intersection leading to the park shall be combined with additional traffic calming devices to be determined by the town upon consultation with the community for an additional amount to be paid by the applicant not to exceed $25,000. That's our recommended condition 88.
Just a comment, Mr. Korb. You said page 4. The document that you presented said 9.
I'm sorry, page 9. Page 9, item K of the staff report.
How's that look, motion maker?
Sounds good to me.
Seconder?
Also acceptable.
Question, Vice Mayor McNutt.
Thank you. Mr. Korb, would that not be just a change to condition number 50 rather than adding, which already talks about the crosswalk, rather than?
That's a different crosswalk.
Oh,
So the answer is no.
it's a different crosswalk. Well, that's interesting to
I
know.
don't think so.
Pedestrian crosswalk on the west leg of the Gateway Carlton intersection.
No, it's the same crosswalk.
Yeah, it is.
The west leg is opposite the leg that goes across the median. So you have the median that comes through here. There's no crosswalk currently there, so that is a condition of approval. The other leg will be across Carlton.
On the east, yeah. Got it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, that probably needs to be clarified in this language, then, does it not? Because we've just indicated Gateway and Carlton twice without any specificity.
We can clarify that. The west leg, I think, clarifies it from staff's perspective, but additional clarification could be added.
Well, let's add it now.
Yeah, what is the additional identifier to distinguish it from the west leg? East leg?
No, it's the west leg. This one would be...
Oh, it must be after 10 o'clock.
Common crosswalk at Carlton and Gateway. We just need a descriptor there.
Across Carlton.
Okay, the new traffic calming crosswalk across Carlton at Gateway, leading to the park.
So the maker of the motion and the seconder both have accepted that additional condition?
So it says the new traffic calming crosswalk across Carlton at Gateway. And you said leading to the park?
Yeah, like it says, leading to the park.
Okay, that's in the language already. All right, that's acceptable.
And that's fine.
The next issue that...
And just to clarify, since we are dealing with budget tonight as well, the additional traffic calming devices would lead to an additional amount to be paid by the applicant not to exceed $25,000.
Correct.
That was where staff came up with that. That is not inclusive of the crosswalk costs. Those are what they were already budgeted.
Oh, you say the original language, yes, okay.
The next item was whether to modify condition number 3 to add some minimum square footage for retail or restaurant on the bottom floor. The discussion right now is 7,500 square feet.
Staff would propose, based on 2 council comments, that the first floor shall contain a minimum of 7,000 square feet of retail or restaurant space in the single-story leg fronting on Los Gatos Boulevard. Staff was going to say, originally said 8,500. We were going to, when I wrote this, I said 7,500, but I've heard two council members say 7,000, so I was just being respectful.
Motion maker, what would you like the motion to read?
I would like us to discuss this issue.
Okay.
And that's why I really wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to deal with this, because the question is how significant is it to the council that we have retail and/or restaurant on the ground floor? And I do appreciate the applicant's request for greater flexibility. I think it's already been indicated by a couple of council persons that we want to acknowledge in a particularly difficult economic time that is possible. But we also want to at least weigh in on the retail restaurant component and the interests of the council. So,
Mr. Larson, you want to weigh in, then we'll continue.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, when staff was considering this issue based on inquiries received today, we initially were talking about 10,000 to 8,500 as a reasonable square footage. We then looked at the configuration of the building and the single-story leg that projects out to Los Gatos Boulevard, and we thought that was the optimal location for a retail or restaurant activity to occur. Where that actual line is going to be somewhat subject to market forces within the regulatory context that the council sets as part of this approval. 8,000 would be 20% of the total building, slightly less than 1/3 of the ground floor. And that's, staff would recommend a larger amount, but we are respectful to the applicant's concerns as expressed to you tonight. So I think we're in the range where we need to be.
Thank you for your recommendation. Motion maker, what would you like to do?
I frankly would like to hear from the applicant. Specifically, we got this far down the line, and, the silent partner is sitting out there. My preference is a higher number than a lower number. And my request of the applicant is to be, very judicious in the way you respond to what we're looking for, which is, if we're looking at the 8,500 square feet or something in that ballpark, that's 1/3 of the first floor. The other recommendation made was that the language include a comment that we focus this on the front leg, the leg that abuts the boulevard. So you can probably address both, because we have language for both.
Thank you. And before you do, you know how Mr. Brzezinski feels, you know how Mr. Rice feels. I'll chime in, as is my prerogative to do. And for me, that corner spot at Los Gatos Boulevard and Gateway, no offense to my insurance agent, State Farm, I don't want to see there that should be retail. Okay, or restaurant. It should be something like that. I'm also in the same camp with retail on the ground floor, office up above, as our other shopping centers. So I just wanted to let you know there's at least 3 people feeling that same way. And given that, what do you feel?
I appreciate the comments. And so I can certainly understand the goal to have Los Gatos Boulevard be a retail-oriented boulevard. And so if 8,500 square feet gets you comfortable to be able to have it on that front leg, then that's something that we can certainly, we will live with.
Sounds like a done deal to me.
Now,
the language, therefore, would be amended to say...
Are you done with Mr. Dare for the moment?
I'm sorry, Mr. Dare, yes, thank you very much.
Please, thank you.
So there's a continuation of that sentence, and now reads, or would read, the first floor shall contain a minimum of 8,500 square feet of retail or restaurant space in the single-story leg fronting Los Gatos Boulevard.
Seconder?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Larson, you have that change? Okay, motion maker. What else do you need in condition modifications?
If I can just remind the council, you discussed securing the parking lot, and the issue there was whether to set a time. We think it probably would be appropriate as part of this application to not set a time, but to have an overall requirement that the parking lot be closed and secured when the last business closes according to its approved hours of operation. Those hours of operation will be incrementally determined later, either based on CUPs issued for uses or any other application that may be required, or the town code if there are not uses that require any approval. So the condition would be to require that the parking lot be closed and secured when the last business closes according to its approved hours of operation.
Mr. Corb, what you said.
Business within the complex.
I need to discuss that with the motion maker. I don't want to interrupt. Were you going to say something, Mr.
Yeah,
Corb?
I'm going to say, are we differentiating retail restaurant from office in this regard, or is it just the last?
We can even say the last use within the complex, which can be anything. But the point is, a restaurant may close most likely close much earlier or later than an office use. You want to capture, at the very least, the very last business and allow it to have the use of the parking lot.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
No, as far as I'm concerned, when it's time for the retail to well, let's say the restaurant, if a restaurant occurs, I would rather see that underground lot secured at the end of the business day for the office uses, and that the parking should be available for the retail space at ground level. Now, is that sufficient for accommodating this issue? Yes.
Mr. Rice.
That's exactly where I was going to go, because I think the intent is for the underground parking to be for the office space, not for retail, and I don't want to leave it open until 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night when the restaurant's open. I'd rather see something along the lines of, we were in an office building that I think it was at 7 p.m., the gate came down. It was still, because, you put a software company or a tech company in the office space, they may be there at all hours. And I would rather see a hard stop at a reasonable time. It's not going to affect the retail or restaurant because there's adequate surface parking.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Brzezinski.
If I might, I'd like to ask the applicant if we could get a comment on that as well, because, I'm concerned a little bit about the number of spaces at surface versus the number of spaces below grade, and whether or not we would compound our problem if we have a popular restaurant.
Understood.
And so now you've got bleed off into the neighborhood that we didn't intend. So, best intentions, unexpected consequences. Would you, if through the mayor, would you comment?
Yes, thank you. What I would suggest as we come back with the CUP, and we know the size of that tenant and what the parking demands are, that we set that condition, just like we are the hours of operation. It would be our goal to do exactly what the council is looking at, have the office parking secured for the office. But we wouldn't want to have overflow parking, as Council Member Brzezinski had mentioned, because we have a successful restaurant. So I think, we'd like to bring that back in when we know the size.
All right, and Mr. Paulson's indicated that we could have an impact, because a successful business in later hours would not be able to find parking at the surface level. So with that, the question for us is security. The applicant has indicated earlier that the intent is to secure it either by a gate to close at a certain point or a security guard to be present prior to the gate closure. I don't know what council's feeling is. I'd like to hear this, but
okay.
Is it necessary for us to actually create some language that accommodates both?
Sure. First, we'll go to Mr. Larson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Przynski, two comments. One, Director Rooney brought up the good point that if the council's intentions are achieved and the entire ground floor were to be retail or restaurant at some point, then the underground parking would be needed even for evening operating hours. So our recommendation that we think fulfills the intent of the maker and seconder of the motion is that a security plan be brought forward as part of the ANS, and one of the clauses would be to allow modifications to that with the approval of subsequent conditional use permits, so that if a later restaurant expansion needed a later operation, it could be modified at that time.
Thank you. And if we simplify that, I think what we're looking for is a security plan that handles the expected needs, because we don't want to impact the neighborhood. I don't want the underground parking open till 1 in the morning because the restaurant's got an alcohol license or whatever that may be. I don't necessarily need it to close at 5 p.m. when the offices close up, so retail somewhere in the middle. But bottom line, we want to make sure that when your development is open, there is adequate parking on site so the neighborhood is not affected, and that parking is secure. And so, Mr. Przynski, however you want to put that in your motion, I think we should do it.
It could actually just be direction to staff as part of ANS, if that's easier, instead of making it a condition.
I would feel comfortable with that, okay? Direction to staff, if you didn't hear, direction to staff during the architecture and site, and with the flexibility as noted that as new uses occur in that approval process, then the accommodation will be varied depending upon need. So that sounds perfectly comfortable to the maker of the motion.
As to the seconder.
Already?
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, the last issue that I heard discussed concerned some exterior visibility issues and how they may affect views of the mountains. Staff's recommendation is that those issues be addressed at ANS. You can give direction with that in that regard, that they be examined at ANS.
Okay.
But it would be more appropriate to do it then when we have some real.
Well, I'll give the motion maker the first shot at that.
The agreement of the motion maker is that at architecture and site, that the proposal be addressed at that time, but to acknowledge in the that in this discussion, the applicant indicated that that would be an architectural change that would be his recommendation, and that the council was in agreement.
And for thank you. And for clarification, we'll get the seconder in just a second. For clarification, what we're referring to is the one-story portion that fronts Gateway and Los Gatos Boulevard, that the parapet not exceed 19 feet. And now it'll be the direction that council gives to ANS when you go through that process. Is that all right with you, Mr. Ray?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That covers my list. Anybody else have anything on their list that is not included in the motion? None. Any further discussion? None. I will call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No, for the reasons previously stated.
Okay. We are there, and I believe, Mr. Korb, even through your list.
Yes.
That includes item number 11. Okay, we're now going to move on to, we had items 5 and 7 pulled.
He left.
And Citizen Ray, would you like to say anything about those items? Nope. Okay.
I'll move approval
Close that
of
portion.
consent items 5 and 7.
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that's other business. Anything else, council? No. Meeting adjourned.